Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2341, Unable to Escape. The tall space door didn't budge. How can this be? Leland muttered gloomily. The strange fish shuttled back and forth in the door of space, making rattling noises. If the space law wasn't supporting the door, it would be just an ordinary door. How would it react when the strange fish shuttled back and forth like that? The fiend race has probably sealed the door of space, Zen said, frowning. The alliance of the powerful clans had taken action, but the fiend race must have been preparing for this eventuality for a long time. The moment the holy beings entered the sixth stage, the fiends cut off their route of retreat. Zen's route of retreat was also destroyed. What should we do? Can this door of space be reset? Leland asked. Zen looked at the door of space and saw that countless, complex array textures had gathered around the door frame. The space law was prohibited in the Abyss Demon region. It must have taken the fiend race a lot of effort to build a space channel like this. And now that they had cut it off, they couldn't recover it in such a short span of time. I'm afraid it can't, Zen said. Leland and the several other true gods weren't worrying as much. In fact, as long as the alliance of the powerful clans defeated the fiend race, they wouldn't find themselves in any kind of a dilemma. But Zen was different. No matter which side won the battle, he would not have the most ideal of endings. Zen was deep in thought when Rochelle's clear voice rang out. Zen wants to escape from the Abyss Demon region. Chaos reigned as the holy beings fought the fiends. But Rochelle's voice, which was filled with life vitality, clearly reached the ears of everyone in the desperation plane. Rochelle thought that it wasn't difficult to win the battle. Only one holy being or demi-holy being was enough to stop Zen. Zen was too crucial, even more crucial than the Abyss Demon region. So she decided to spread the news of his presence at this critical moment. Zen, how could he be here? Rocher was stunned. Even the alliance of powerful clans had paid a heavy price to enter the Abyss Demon region, resulting in the death of several demi-holy beings and consummate true gods. How could Zen explore the forbidden area alone? Had Zen followed the holy beings all along? But this sounded even more impossible. The spiritual sense of the holy beings was very powerful. He couldn't have followed them for so long without being discovered. But when Rocher turned to look, he was shocked to find Zen standing under the door of space. Samuel turned to look, too, and his gaze fell on Zen, doubt shuddering his eyes. Like Rocher, he was also puzzled at Zen's presence. This confusion remained for just 3 seconds before a brilliant light flashed through his eyes. Among the holy beings, only Samuel knew the secret of the reincarnation land. Since Zen had not followed them into the Abyss Demon region, he could only enter through a different entrance. That entrance was the reincarnation land. After all, years ago, Samuel had also left through the reincarnation land. I've arranged everything in the reincarnation land. Even if Zen has found the stone mouse and entered it, he would definitely die. But how did he leave that place? Samuel thought, with worry and killing intent in his heart. This guy has to die. Go to perdition. A gigantic fiend commander came smashing towards Samuel, an axe on his shoulder. The fiend's skin shone with a chaotic red light. His strength was close to that of a demi-holy being at the top level. But under the violent red light, he even had the power to fight a holy being. Since they were matched in strength, the previous fight between Samuel and the fiend commander lasted for dozens of rounds. Seeing that Samuel was distracted from the battle, the fiend commander used all his strength to kill Samuel with one blow. But Samuel sensed the attack and raised his hand to shield himself. Crack! So when the huge axe came crashing towards him, he managed to stop it with his bare hand. The fiend commander was dumbfounded, his huge eyes filled with disbelief. Crack, crack, crack! A tiny crack appeared on the blade of the huge axe and spread throughout its length. The huge axe shattered into pieces, having been blocked by Samuel. Buzz! Samuel's eyes narrowed as he pulled out his sword and flew to attack the fiend commander. The fiend commander was smart and knew that the strength of this holy being was far beyond his imagination. He now understood why this holy being hadn't taken him too seriously before. As Samuel approached, the fiend, with the huge body, jumped up and flew into the air, wanting to escape. But he was much slower than Samuel. He had only flown for a few seconds when he felt a chill emanating from his belly. A voice rang out, "One destructive sword attack can break heaven and earth." There was a hint of truth of godly way hidden in this sword strike. The fiend's body, which was 4,000 feet tall, was now cut in half, leaving him no chance to fight back. Samuel had made every effort to join the alliance of powerful clans, not just to help Nicholas take control of the Abyss Demon region. What was more, if he performed so formidably all the time, Nicholas would be cautious about him. He hadn't been trying his best when he had fought the Fiend Commander earlier. But now, things were different. He had to catch Zen first. Samuel had just turned to head straight for Zen when a mighty roar sounded from behind him. A figure made its way over to him, shrouded in a bright, strong light. At the same time, a huge pit appeared on the plain. Nicholas was standing in the pit. He had just withstood Galio's attack and his clothes were muddy and torn. But his eyes were full of fighting spirit. He looked at Samuel and said, "Samuel, your strength is extraordinary, and it's difficult to deal with these fiend commanders. I need your help." The moment Nicholas finished talking, he turned into a gust of wind and headed for Galio at the end of the Desperation Plain. Such a foxy guy, Samuel muttered furiously. He knew that Nicholas was alert to him. But now, Nicholas, Clark, and Murphy had to deal with Galio without distractions. This meant it was a great opportunity for him. However, it was obvious that Nicholas wanted Samuel to stay at the battlefield. Seeing that Zen was already running towards the left side of the Desperation Plain, Samuel hesitated. Catch him. Laquisha, Elena, and Pascal were also fighting fiercely with the Abyss Demons. They seemed to be one when they worked together and so in tandem. The three of them had just become consummate true gods, but their powers were far beyond that of a consummate true god. But now, the three of them stopped suddenly and stared at the place where Zen was running off. They looked at each other, a look of understanding passing between them. When they fixed their eyes on Zen, they jumped into the air at the same time, and rushed towards Zen at a great speed. Chapter 2342, Pursuers. The Desperation Plain had become quite the chaotic place now. The holy beings might have been currently fighting a fierce battle, but they had a great advantage in the overall situation. In spite of the latter, they were clear on the fact that it wouldn't be as easy when it came to taking the Abyss Demon region down. Seeing as the fiends were willing to fight here, it was obligatory that they had their preparations made in order to meet contingencies. Nicholas pinned down Galio as he quietly observed the whole situation. After Rochelle had given him a warning, Nicholas had equally discovered Zen. When he noticed Zen, his mind was immediately filled with confusion and questions. This guy is simply too amazing. He could enter any dang place he desires. He thought to himself, his heart sinking heavily. He himself had led a group of holy beings into the 6th stage, and had experienced a lot of trouble in doing so. It had been quite the challenging task. He just couldn't figure out how Zen, a mere consummate true god, had come here. That wasn't to say that Nicholas thought Zen's arrival was a bad thing, though. One of the main reasons Nicholas was in such a hurry to control the Abyss Demon region was because he wanted to confront the people at the other shore realm outside the Divine Land. If he could catch Zen, then it would be an incredible benefit for him. At the very least, he could get to know the masters of the other shore realm through Zen. It had only taken a few quick seconds for these crazy thoughts to start relaying each other in his mind. By moving his lips ever so slightly, he sent a message through his life vitality. The Dongfang clan, the Tang clan and the Mu clan each had a demi-holy being capable of receiving his message. Upon reception, each of them looked at the north side of the Desperation Plain. They immediately jumped out of battle and flew in that direction. These guys are so powerful. Even fiends are no match. Can you believe it? If only they could kill those fiends. What a bitter situation this all is. Even Galio is pressed and beaten by them. Ha ha. The strange fish leaned on the side of the space door and from its position, watched the chaotic battle with interest. Leland said nothing and kept a calm, casual look on his face. A few of the demi-holy beings in the Desperation Plain were Leland's acquaintances. Although somewhat worried, he still had hope. As long as the powerful alliance won, he knew he would eventually get through this hard period of time. He was definitely concerned about Zen, however. Looking intently in the direction Zen had fled, Leland saw at least 7 or 8 consummate true gods chasing after him at a very fast pace. They appeared to be catching up to him, too. All thus suggested that what Zen had said was true. He was indeed connected to the powerful alliance because otherwise, at such a critical moment, the alliance would never have sent warriors to follow him. Nonetheless, Zen's strength was far beyond that of a normal consummate true god. In fact, the two didn't compare at all. Even as a mighty demi-holy being, Leland would still be placed under great pressure when fighting Zen. The strike where Zen had killed the Fiend Commander had stunned Leland in particular. So much so, in fact, that he was sure he wouldn't be capable of withstanding it. He was definitely terrified. Even if these consummate true gods were from powerful clans, they weren't necessarily up to par with Zen, nor could they be considered a match for battle. I really hope you can get out of here successfully, Zen. He owed Zen a debt of gratitude. If it weren't for Zen, he would have died back in the reincarnation land. Just as Leland was losing himself deeper and deeper in thought, 3 other figures unexpectedly appeared in that direction. Oh, 3 demi-holy beings. Leland's eyes visibly narrowed at once. Jaden Dongfang, Matthew Mu and Raymond Tang. He exclaimed. Much like the consummate true gods, the demi-holy beings had different levels of strength. A top-level consummate true god, such as Troy, was not inferior to an ordinary demi-holy being when it came to strength. A demi-holy being who wasn't a powerful clan member, like Leland, would never have the strength nor the skill to defeat Troy. Jaden Dongfang, Matthew Mu and Raymond Tang were the most powerful demi-holy beings among all the powerful clans. It was safe to say that it was surprising to see this trio chasing after Zen. Like Leland, they were also the demi-holy beings, but their strength, power and skill had much exceeded his. They were on 2 very separate levels. These impressive demi-holy beings have equally come out. I'm afraid that Zen might be in danger. As Leland spoke these words, he couldn't help himself from sighing loudly. Even though he wanted to help, he wasn't powerful enough, and desire alone just wouldn't be enough. He had no other choice but to sit still and silently hope that Zen could escape safely. Seeing as Rochelle had reminded the holy beings of Zen's coming, Zen had made the ultimate decision to flee. When it came down to it, Zen was certain that falling into the fiend's hands was probably better than getting caught by Nicholas. Once he passed through the mountain range on the left side of the Desperation Plain, a huge sea of bubbling hot lava suddenly confronted him. Left with no choice, Zen flew over the lava sea's surface without a moment's hesitation and launched his spiritual sense. They are chasing me, he said to himself. As soon as Zen spread his spiritual sense out, he sensed 3 new auras appear behind him. He glanced back for less than a split second, just long enough to take notice that the auras were from 3 consummate true gods. Just 3 consummate true gods? He asked. Zen squinted his eyes a little. Upon returning to the divine land, Zen had immediately displayed his strength. In other words, Nicholas should know that the consummate true gods simply weren't powerful enough to catch him. Even 30 of them couldn't make it, let alone just 3. As soon as he made note of who they had sent, Zen wasn't in the mood to pay them any attention. He continued zooming over the lava sea with concentration. On the right side of the Desperation Plain was located the Fiend Race's pasture. There, the fierce monsters present were basically their food. Yet, what Zen didn't know was that on the left side was the famous Desperation Sea. Not even a fiend would want to step foot into a darn place such as this one. Plop, plop, plop. As Zen was speeding forward, layers of ripples suddenly began to appear in the lava sea just inches below his feet. As he noticed the additional movement in the lava sea, Zen frowned. Now, he sensed 8 or 9 powerful auras coming from the sea. Thunder materialization, he shouted with might. Crack, a huge pair of thunder wings materialized on Zen's back at once, and his speed increased tenfold. While Zen was hurrying forward, several huge creatures suddenly appeared in the lava sea, completely blocking his way. Zen didn't know what to do or where to go. Splash! The boiling, orange-red lava splashed everywhere. From the lava emerged several enormous, slender snake heads, each of which was as bright as freshly polished metal. Facing Zen head-on, they all gave off a ferocious aura. No way, 9-head snake living in the lava sea. This is impossible. Zen had no interest, nor did he have the time, to start guessing the 9-head snake's origin. Just seconds before the snake heads had a chance to come at him with their gaping mouths and sharp fangs, Zen swung his sword in front of him several times. Swish, swish, swish. As his sword light continued to flash in the air, Zen had already spread his thunder wings and quickly raised himself off the lava, continuing to flee forward. He had no time to fool around with such monsters. Grr! Ow! Without any forewarning, the 9-head snake in the lava raised skyward and began to howl vehemently. As it did so, it began to extend its huge heads infinitely and rushed directly toward Zen. The snake heads inevitably moved even faster than Zen could. 3 of them even got ahead of Zen, slithering in front of him in order to block his way. Dang it, Zen said under his breath. 8 smoky melodies. Truth of cultivation nature, he called. At that exact moment, Zen's body became extremely nimble. From the air, he shot himself outward in a strange way and swept past the snake heads. The 9 heads opened their mouths to attack but only bit Zen's shadow trailing behind him. The 9-head snake's block a few moments ago had had its desired effect, though. The pursuers behind Zen seemed to really be catching up now. At least, they were definitely even closer to him than before. Zen turned around in order to avoid the 9-head snake's attacks when his gaze froze. Only then did he realize that 2 of the people who were apparently chasing him, or so he thought, were actually Laquisha and Elena. Chapter 2343, The Blackwater Area. Forming a special array, the 3 members of the Han clan went into formation, with Laquisha in front, and Pascal and Elena standing on each of her sides. All 3 of them moved exceptionally fast, approaching Zen quickly when he was stopped by the 9-head snake. When he was still in the reincarnation land, Zen learned about Samuel's secret and that the memory flames of these 3 had been erased. Looking them now, he knew that they were not the same people he had known about. Glancing at them, Zen had no intention to stop. Now his enemies were only these 3 people from the Han clan. If he hesitated a little longer, he would end up battling with not just the consummate true gods, but also the demi-holy and holy beings. Though he wanted to help them to regain their original memories, he realized that now was not the right time to do that. Zen smoothly evaded the 9 huge heads of the snake like a feather and then escaped far away. Seeing him flee like a thief angered the 9-head snake. And since it couldn't catch up with Zen's speed, it decided to release its anger on the approaching members of the Han clan. Roar! The huge creature let out an angry cry. Facing the direction where Laquisha and the 2 others were fast approaching, the creature opened the mouths of all of its 9 heads at the same time, spitting out some blood balls. Leading the way, Laquisha's eyes flashed with a purple light, while a softer purple light suddenly flashed in the magic array they formed. Elena's and Pascal's internal momentum was thoroughly gathered by this magic array, merging with Laquisha's. Purple Fire Sword. It was a magical joint attack array which Samuel himself created. After connecting their minds together and cooperating with the magic array, they found that their joined strength increased several times. Seeing the blood balls spewed out by the 9-head snake flying towards them, Laquisha formed a purple fire sword in her hand and waved it gently. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Held in her hands, the sword quickly split into dozens of smaller swords floating in the air. These smaller swords flew in all directions. Some swords penetrated the blood balls and burned them to ashes, while most of them directly attacked the 9-head snake. With its huge body, the monster moved very slowly and was unable to dodge. In a blink of an eye, the small swords that Laquisha released penetrated its entire body. While each small sword was only palm-sized, the head of the 9-head snake was over 1,000 feet long and dozens of feet wide. Looking with naked eyes, the small blades didn't appear to cause any injuries to its huge body. Staring at the monster, Laquisha's eyes flashed a purple light again and ordered in a low voice, "Explode now." Boom! All the swords stuck on the monster's body blew up at the same time, and blazing purple flames instantly spread from the necks of the 9 huge heads. It howled in pain, twisted and fell into the sea of lava right below it. The ferocious purple flames kept burning violently even after they were mixed in the lava. Everything went so fast. The next second, the 9-head snake was burnt to ashes, leaving only a trace of purple fire spread on the surface of the sea of lava. Looks like Laquisha's purple flame has become more powerful after she reached consummation of the true god realm. Zen thought to himself. He looked back to observe the situation behind him as he rapidly fled away. Knowing that the 9-head snake was not a very powerful creature, Zen could easily defeat it. However, in order to escape, he chose not to kill it. Instead, he left it behind to stop the 3 members of the Han clan who were after him. Unexpectedly, Laquisha killed it easily. "Get him!" Laquisha ordered indifferently, making a light flash in the middle of the magic array they formed. Increasing their speed to the extreme, they continued to chase on Zen. As soon as the 3 members of Han clan left, several people following them arrived at this place. They were Rochelle, Troy and Sean. After their last crushing defeat, they realized the fact that they were no match for Zen now. But they couldn't bear to see Zen run away just like that, knowing that the demi-holy beings of their clans would soon come to support them. Laquisha has just reached consummation of the true god realm. How did she become so powerful? Staring at the burning purple fire on the lava, Rochelle commented with astonishment, realizing that was the place where the 9-head snake had been killed. Those three is quite a strange bunch. They all changed a lot both in temperament and strength, said Troy with a serious expression. Just then, 3 more figures flew towards them from behind. It turned out to be the 3 demi-holy beings, Jaden, Matthew and Raymond. They came a little late, as they were sent here by Nicholas himself. But now they had caught up with the rest. Zen continued to run, with several other groups of people chasing after him above the sea of lava. The hot air continued to rise from the sea of lava and blow on his face. Although he looked calm on the surface, he started to feel a little anxious. Without the guidance of the strange fish, he felt lost and uneasy. If he strayed into the lairs of some powerful creatures, he would be in great trouble. He also couldn't get rid of the people chasing after him. The 3 members of the Han clan followed very closely behind. There were several more powerful warriors a little behind them. Zen estimated that there were demi-holy beings. Just as Zen was thinking about an escape plan, the seemingly endless sea of lava suddenly came to an end. He slowed down, seeing the black coastline in front of him. At first, Zen felt a bit strange seeing the black coastline. It was not until he got a little closer that he realized it was not a coastline, but the edge of a black water area. The black coastline appeared to be a dividing line between the 2 areas of liquid. On one side was the hot lava while the dark black water was on the other. The boundary between them was very clear. One never interfered with the other. What is this place? Zen muttered, taking his time to look around. He obviously found the vast black water ahead very weird. Not seeing anything moving from where he stood, it seemed to be a death land. If he had run into this kind of place another time and it wasn't necessary for him to enter, Zen would have chosen to take a detour. But now, he was left with no choice. As he hesitated for a little while, he could already hear a sharp whistling sound coming from behind him. Whoosh! A spiraling purple fire sword came straight for Zen. It was Laquisha, launching an attack across a distance of tens of thousands of feet. Zen rolled in the air, easily dodging the fire sword. Spreading the lightning wings, he then entered the black water area ahead. Without any hesitation, the 3 members of the Han clan continued to chase after him. Soon after, Jaden, Matthew, Raymond, Rochelle and the rest arrived. Their faces became serious when they saw the black space. What is this place? The water is so black, and I can see no signs of life, Jaden said with a frown. After all, they were in the Abyss Demon region. The Forbidden Land had a lot of dangerous places. Even if they had a high level of cultivation base, they still had to be very careful most of the time. It doesn't matter, Rochelle said, thinking about how far Zen would have been now. We shouldn't let that brat escape from us. If you enter this place carelessly, you might end up dead sooner. After thinking for a while, Matthew added, Rachel, why don't you guys go back first? We'll take care of the matter and chase after Zen. In the eyes of the demi-holy beings, Rochelle and the other young warriors had the opportunity to inherit the Abyss Demon region. It would be a pity if they lost their lives here. Moreover, they strongly believed that the 3 of them were enough to deal with Zen. After coming up with a decision, the 3 demi-holy beings rushed into the black water area leaving the rest behind. Chapter 2344, The Truth. The consummate true gods were also unwilling to give up. But they had no choice but to step down as their elders had given the order. Moreover, Zen was far more powerful than them and they were no match for him. In the end, Rochelle had no choice but to go back. Whoosh! A purple fire sword streaked across the black water and shot towards Zen explosively. Laquisha was launching consecutive attacks on him. Zen twisted his body abruptly but the purple fire sword still followed his movements. As he lifted his body upwards, the purple fire sword brushed across the black water as it lost its target. As the unearthly purple fire touched the black water, it immediately went out and disappeared. The black water. Zen watched the scene unfolding in front of his eyes and grew more cautious. He knew perfectly well how deadly the unearthly purple fire from Laquisha was. It could burn almost everything. Especially after Laquisha's cultivation base had improved greatly, it could not only burn the 9-head snake, but even light up the lava sea in the Abyss Demon region. But yet it got put out after touching the black water. What was that black water? How could it put out the fire? Just as Zen was considering the question, a cold voice rang from behind him. You have been to the reincarnation land, haven't you? Asked Laquisha. As Laquisha, Elena and Pascal had combined as one, they could fly faster than Zen, and the distance between them and Zen was gradually shortened. Yes. So what? Zen replied coolly. What did you see in the reincarnation land? Asked Laquisha. Zen turned his head and looked indifferently at Laquisha, who was not far away. Why should I tell you? Oh, Laquisha's face hardened with a trace of coldness and she pinched her fingers together slightly. Next to her, Elena and Pascal activated the huge array in the center at the same time. Whirl, the unearthly purple fire branched out like vines in the air and turned into a large purple fire array which shrouded Zen. Zen's instinct was to dodge, but it happened too fast for him to do anything. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With Zen trapped, Laquisha, Elena and Pascal separated from each other and stood on the 3 important positions of the purple fire array. Even top-level demi-holy beings can't get out of this dragon-trapping array with my preternatural purple fire, Laquisha sneered. Now you have plenty of time to tell me. The preternatural purple fire from Laquisha was so powerful that even holy beings had to dodge once it burned. There was no doubt or denying that the 3 of them could use this preternatural purple fire array to trap holy beings. The most important aspect of the dragon-trapping array was to lock up the space. Once the top-level demi-holy beings were trapped in it, they could not make use of the grand teleportation technique. Furthermore, the grand teleportation technique was forbidden in the Abyss Demon region, which was to their advantage. Zen stood still in the middle of the dragon-trapping array and remained calm. He examined the fire array closely and asked, "Is this dragon-trapping array created by Samuel? I have to say that it is really exquisite." "Yes, so what?" There was a hint of pride on Laquisha's face. Zen looked directly at Laquisha and continued, "You have controlled the 3 of them, so they can make such a mysterious array. And the person behind all this is you, Samuel. Am I right?" Laquisha glared at Zen and said, "It has nothing to do with you. You have been a holy being for 2 lifetimes. You are a person with great luck. The divine land treats you well. But is it really worthwhile to sacrifice your children just for the sake of vengeance?" "Think about it," Zen said. "What do you mean?" Laquisha's face darkened at his words. "Do I need to spell it out for you? Holy Gregorio." Zen couldn't help blurting out the truth. What he said greatly stunned Laquisha, Elena, Pascal and Samuel on the desperation plane. They all wore exactly the same expressions of shock. Zen's other deductions didn't matter at all to Samuel. After all, people often wondered how his 3 children became consummate true gods, but he didn't bother to explain to them. But Zen had revealed his biggest secret. There was nothing he feared more than someone finding out his secret. More than 20 years ago, he had regained his memories from his previous life. He had been trying to approach Nicholas since then. However, Nicholas was very alert to the Han clan, so he had never had a good chance. He was determined to find a good time to take actions on this trip to the Abyss Demon region. He was going to destroy the whole Dongfang clan and even the whole union of the powerful clans on the floating islands. But if Nicholas found out his true identity, the consequences were hugely undesirable. "How did you know that? Did the stone mouse tell you?" Laquisha asked sullenly. Zen replied with a shrug, "Yes, and no. It just told me its owner was Gregorio. I managed to figure out everything else by following Gregorio's memories. So that's how it is." Laquisha nodded slightly. A faint smile appeared on her gloomy face. "It really comes as a big surprise to learn that you have found out my identity, but unfortunately you'll have no chance to tell others about it. Go to perdition." As soon as she finished her words, the purple flames roared in the dragon-trapping array around Zen. Samuel was determined to kill Zen inside the array. Staring at the blazing flames, Zen shook his head slightly and said, "It seems that you don't care much about Laquisha." "What do you mean?" Laquisha frowned and asked. "Hasn't Laquisha told you that her purple fire can burn everything except me?" Zen smirked. "Don't be stubborn." Samuel refused to believe his words. On the desperation plane, he ordered Laquisha to activate the dragon-trapping array. The flames from all directions swarmed towards Zen, completely engulfing him and burning crazily. Even holy beings found it troublesome to deal with the unearthly purple fire condensed by Laquisha. Zen, however, was only at the consummation of true god realm. Splash! Zen's body drifted slowly in the unearthly purple fire. When he came out, he was unharmed. His body was shining with golden light, making him look like a Buddha statue plated with a layer of gold foil. Despite being in 2 different locations, Samuel on the desperation plane and Laquisha standing right opposite Zen, both had the same reaction, which was to stare with wide eyes. They were dumbstruck by the impossible scene. Only then did Samuel vaguely remember that Alfredo had once reported to him that Zen seemed to have a body that was unaffected by fire, but he hadn't taken it seriously as Zen was merely a low-rank true god at that time. He had chosen to control Laquisha, Elena and Pascal because Laquisha had the unearthly purple fire. He had made use of the power given to him by the stone mouse to urge the three of them to reach the consummation of true God realm. After that, they could even kill the top-level demi-holy beings if they worked together with the help of Laquisha's unearthly purple fire. But now they met this man who was unaffected by the unearthly purple fire at all, and their biggest advantage was gone. Swish! After rushing out the purple fire, Zen went straight to Laquisha. Laquisha reacted quickly and only took a step back, while Pascal and Elena took a step further. The three of them used the dragon trapping array to fight against Zen. However, what made their array so powerful was the purple fire. Since it didn't work on Zen, they could do nothing to trap him. Chapter 2345, Zen's Arrogance. The wind rushed by making a soft whirring sound like a propeller blade. Zen had flashed through several layers of fire curtains and stopped in front of Laquisha in the blink of an eye. He stretched out his hand and, in a flash, got a hold of Laquisha's head. No, 9527. It's up to you. This thought rolled around inside Zen's mind. Both Laquisha and Elena were the puppets of Samuel, meaning that they were the products between the human and the puppet. Their souls might still be intact, but their memory flames had disappeared. They only had small fragments of the memory flames. The memories were chaotic at best, and there were only glimpses of different cultivations. What had made them who they were was gone. They had no more personality. They were mindless, lifeless puppets. The only way to help them restore their memories was to force their memory flames back into their souls. Before that could happen though, they had to be rid of the choppy memories in their souls and escape from Samuel's control at the same time. Zen did not have the knowledge to perform any of that, so he had to hand that task off to No. 9527. The moment Zen had taken hold of Laquisha's head, number 9527 entered her mind. Laquisha's soul was floating quietly, curled up into a ball. Behind her soul there was a pale yellow worm crawling along her back. Its face reflected the image of Samuel. What's this? Samuel's face contorted into a scowl as he beheld the green ball of light, which was number 9527, surprise flickering in his eyes. Although he didn't know what it was exactly, he knew it was a threat to him. The surface of the parasite began to emit a soft, yellow light. When the light became almost too bright, it launched a soul attack at number 9527. Go to perdition, Samuel yelled. The light morphed into numerous soul thorns that spiraled towards the green ball of light. Number 9527 might be the lowest level as a soul body, and not very powerful, but it was still a part of the Chaos Ancient God's soul. It was easy for it to block against Samuel's soul worm. This attack with the yellow soul thorns was an extremely powerful move, which would be beyond the endurance of an ordinary consummate true God's soul. As the thorns reached the surface of the green ball of light, they simply bounced off. They left no damage and the ball did not react at all. There was a flash of light across the green ball's surface, and a light green tentacle formed in the center of the ball. The tentacle wriggled and shook until it transformed into a blade. It slashed through the air towards the pale yellow worm. There was a brief moment that stretched on for a while before the worm split into two pieces and slipped from Laquisha's back. As a soul it wasn't dead, so it attempted to escape. Number 9527 was faster though, and shot out the tentacle to entangle the worm in a vice-like hold. Ignoring the struggle it put up, number 9527 dragged the nasty thing into its own soul. Number 9527 did not need to strengthen itself, and normally the owner and the brain masters would not allow it. However, a field commander would sometimes have to decide against the king's orders. Number 9527 had gradually developed its own consciousness, so there were not so many restrictions on it anymore. There was simply no way it would pass up a chance to devour another soul. Besides, killing the worm meant severing the connection between Laquisha and Samuel completely. It is done, number 9527 sent the thought to Zen. It had only taken it 3 seconds to penetrate Laquisha's mind, and kill the yellow parasite. Laquisha had lost consciousness by that point, and her head drooped forward with glassy eyes staring at nothing. Zen held onto her arm for a moment, waiting for No 9527's soul to return to him. When he felt the soul return, Zen held onto Laquisha and flashed away to catch Elena. Once he had her in his grasp, number 9527 repeated the process. Elena's eyes had been blank with indifference, but the moment Samuel's control was gone, the indifference morphed into confusion. She had been the same as Laquisha, still with a soul but no the memory flame. Zen and number 9527 had released the two girls from underneath Samuel's control in quick succession. Only Pascal was left to be rescued. Before Zen could make a move towards his next target, Pascal had fled in the opposite direction. How could he do that? Samuel whispered on the desperation plane. His face was dark and murderous. The dragon trapping array set up by the three members of the Han clan was one of their trump cards, but it had been easily broken. How could he accept that failure? The only thing he could do now was to make Pascal run away. If he was rescued by Zen as well, Samuel wouldn't stand a chance. As a holy being, Samuel was unable to inherit the Abyss Demon region. Naturally, he didn't want to lose control of his last puppet for that reason. Just as Samuel's worry skyrocketed thinking that Zen would catch up to Pascal, he caught sight of three others flying in the opposite direction of Pascal. His scowl darkened when he realized it was Jaden, Matthew and Raymond. It would be okay if Zen does not disclose his identity, but if he does, it will get ugly, Samuel muttered, a hint of gloom flashing in his eyes. He might not be afraid of Nicholas, but he didn't think it was good timing. He just hadn't gotten any real leverage yet. Above the black waters, the three demi-holy beings, Jaden, Matthew and Raymond, passed by Pascal. They glanced at him with a bored expression, and did nothing to stop him. They were not here for him after all. Their target was Zen. He has proved himself to be a consummate true god who can beat 10 alone. He actually dared break into the 6th stage of the Abyss Demon region. It's incredible, Jaden said with a laugh. It was easy for them to catch up to Zen, thanks to the three members from the Han clan, who had tried to stop him. Zen decided it best not to attempt to escape. He did not want to have to go deeper into the black waters. As long as the pursuers were only the demi-holy beings, Zen felt he might have a chance if he fought them. If you find it so amazing, perhaps you could just leave, Zen replied faintly. A faint light shone from Zen's cinnabar field as he spoke. He would put Elena and Laquisha in his inner world. Once Zen took back their memory flames, they would be able to restore their original memories. For now they needed to be in a safe place. I think it would be best if you present your hands for capture, said Matthew coldly, as he took a step forward and stared hard at Zen. The three demi-holy beings knew they were strong enough to deter people from retaliating. All three of them, who were all top-level demi-holy beings, were confident that they would win over a holy being, let alone Zen. It was almost laughable seeing as Zen had only just reached the consummation of the true god realm. You all want me to present my hands to you, and surrender to capture? Zen shook his head. I'm afraid you're not strong enough. How arrogant. How could anyone expect Raymond to accept that kind of arrogance from a consummate true god? The killing intent swelled in his chest to an unbearable level. The moment Raymond revealed his killing intent, a ball suddenly appeared above Zen's head with a crackling sound. With what sounded like a breath from the ball, a soul-suppressing sword formed, startling even the demi-holy beings. In an instant it flew towards Raymond. Unexpectedly, the first latent theurgy began to work. Chapter 2346, My Reliance. Zen's head had contained 7 latent theurgies all this while. But after a while, these balls of theurgies were concealed so that no one could see them. The first latent theurgy that was activated was the killing intent counterattack. This theurgy would work whenever someone became hostile towards him. But even Zen couldn't help but shrink at the explosion that the soul-suppressing sword had sent through the ball. The mighty soul pressure had been released, causing his soul to stiffen. However, this was only an aftereffect. The soul-suppressing sword was then placed before Raymond, with Jaden and Matthew standing on either side of him. The moment they faced the soul-suppressing sword, their sense of self diminished and they began to feel small, like ants. The enormous soul pressure was like an infinite giant, and they were too weak to resist or escape. As a result, all three of them stood there like statues, until the soul-suppressing sword hit Raymond's head. Boom! A low muffled sound was heard. Once the soul-suppressing sword had killed Raymond's soul, it disappeared into his head. Raymond's eyes flashed, emitting 2 rays of dazzling golden light, before becoming dull and remote. Whoosh! Now that Raymond's body had lost its soul, it began to fall backwards into the black water. Frightened at this sight, Jaden and Matthew didn't stop Raymond's body, and let him fall into the black water. Pascal, who was still fleeing in the distance, turned around suddenly. Samuel, standing on the desperation plane, sensed what had happened through Pascal. His face darkened in shock. What was that? How could it launch such a powerful soul attack? There was probably no one in the divine land who could resist a soul attack of this level. Even a warrior at the other shore realm would die if he or she were to touch it. Zen also looked regretful. He had had a vague feeling that the killing intent counterattack was a powerful weapon, but he hadn't expected the soul-suppressing sword to be so horrifying. It could chop off souls belonging to demi-holy beings and even holy beings and warriors at the other shore realm. Using it to kill a demi-holy being of the Tang clan was a waste of its potential. As its name suggests, the killing intent counterattack will be triggered the moment it senses any killing intent. But why hadn't it been activated before? Zen was suspicious. There had been many creatures that had probably wanted to kill him on the way here. Laquisha and the fiends were just a few of them. Why hadn't the killing intent counterattack been activated when Zen had faced them? Why did the soul-suppressing sword choose to kill Raymond? After all, the fiends had also wanted to kill him. It's because the fiends are not real living creatures, while Laquisha and her siblings are just puppets, number 9527 explained patiently. The latent thurgies are used to deal with special situations. They need a lot of conditions before they are triggered, especially the killing intent counterattack. It won't kill an ant just because it wants to kill you. It needs to distinguish the targets. Zen nodded. He understood that in critical times, the latent thurgies could not only protect his life, but also have a reverse effect. Now that he had used a latent thurgy, he only had 6 left. Matthew's eyes narrowed as he stared at Zen. They hadn't expected a demi-holy being to die before they could even take action. Raymond's strength was on par with that of Jaden and Matthew. If this was Zen's real strength, both of them should turn around and run away as far as possible. "What's this thurgy?" Jaden asked, his throat tight and voice almost a whisper. Zen, on the contrary, looked relaxed. He was satisfied with the power of the soul-suppressing sword. "Why should I tell you? This is not one of your abilities," Matthew said, narrowing his eyes even further. "Even a powerful warrior at the other shore realm wouldn't be able to do it. It is probably some kind of a one-time magic weapon." Zen hadn't used any magic weapon, but it looked to them that the soul-suppressing sword had shot out rather suddenly. Matthew, however, was close to the truth. In a way, the latent thurgies were like one-time magic weapons, but the owner couldn't control when they were triggered and how they worked. What Matthew said is right. It's impossible for you to master such a thurgy. And now that you've used it once, you won't be able to use it for a second time. You can't escape death since you don't have any other reliance. Saying this, Jaden pulled out a snake spear from a contraption on his waist. He had thought that if Zen didn't use any thurgy, he wouldn't pose a threat to him. Matthew and Jaden were the most outstanding of the dozens of demi-holy beings on the floating islands. If they joined hands, they could definitely defeat Zen, who was merely a consummate true god. Raymond met with an awful death. I will take revenge for him. Matthew clenched his hand, causing beams of golden light to shoot out of his mouth. This golden light turned into incantations that were strangely shaped and merged and turned into a golden sword in his hand. This was the invisible incantation sword, a thurgy beyond the indestructible metal godly way that Matthew had learned. Zen stood proudly, his huge thunder wings emitted cracking sounds from time to time. He smiled as he looked at the 2 demi-holy beings who were ready to fight, and said, "You were right. The thurgy can only be used once. But I have other weapons." As he spoke, he lifted the shadow-bearing sword. He had managed to greatly shock the 2 demi-holy beings with his words. It would be a lie to say that they were not worried. They were afraid that Zen would use other frightening magic weapons and that they would certainly get killed. After all, the experts of the other shore realm had sent Zen to the divine land. Who knew what powerful magic weapons the experts had given him? But Zen didn't move now that he had lifted the shadow-bearing sword. "On what do you rely now?" Matthew asked angrily. He had a feeling that he had been fooled. "I rely on myself." Zen had barely finished talking when the pair of thunder wings on his back stretched with a deafening sound. With an almighty crack, Zen turned into a thunderbolt and shot towards Matthew, the shadow-bearing sword in his hand. Matthew really doubted if Zen had any other secret weapon, or if he had anyone to help him remain calm. At Zen's answer, he burst out into laughter. He didn't know how a consummate true god could defeat 2 top-level demi-holy beings. But at the end of Zen's words, the shadow-bearing sword came hacking down on Matthew's head. "Do you think you can defeat us alone?" A trace of contempt appeared in Matthew's eyes. He raised his invisible incantation sword to fend off Zen's shadow-bearing sword. It was obvious that he was treating Zen's sword as some kind of a joke. But the moment the 2 swords met, the invisible incantation sword dissipated into hundreds of golden incantations. Matthew was stunned, again. He had expected everything, but he hadn't expected Zen to be able to destroy his invisible incantation sword. The indestructible metal godly way was known for its toughness and fierceness. The invisible incantation sword was a theurgy that was derived from the consummation level of the indestructible metal godly way. It couldn't be destroyed so easily. Chapter 2347, Black Eyes. Matthew was most proud of this sword. He was certain that among all of the Divine Land's treasures, it would rank in the top 10 in terms of strength. However, to Matthew's surprise, the moment it came into contact with the shadow-bearing sword, it disintegrated as if it was made of sand. What is happening? He thought, bewildered. He could not believe what he was seeing. His invisible incantation sword vanished into thin air, while Zen's sword landed on the ground with so much force that it caused a mild tremor. Matthew was unable to make use of the grand teleportation technique, and being at such a close proximity to Zen, he was convinced that he would die. In a battle between powerhouses, one wrong judgment could lead to an excruciating death. Zen needed to seize this unique opportunity to defeat his opponent. When the shadow-bearing sword reached Matthew's head, Jaden's snake spear, which was not far away, zoomed towards Zen. Jaden was quite surprised to see that Zen was actually about to defeat Matthew. However, he couldn't just stand by and watch as Matthew was beheaded by Zen. He directly attacked Zen's face. He did not intend to kill Zen, but he wanted to obstruct him. Swish! A pure and vigorous force shot out from the snake spear. As the demi-holy being of the Dongfang clan, Jaden was stronger than an ordinary demi-holy being. In terms of fighting, the demi-holy beings of the Lu clan and the Xie clan might not be able to defeat him. However, he was only a demi-holy being and not a holy being. So he could not build the universe or revive infinitely. Zen's brows furrowed slightly when he faced the formidable attack from Jaden. If he insisted on killing Matthew, it was likely that the snake spear would pierce his body and he would at least be seriously injured. He abruptly twisted his body to deflect. 8 smoky melodies. Zen's body flew up and down like a piece of paper, pressing close to the snake spear. He finally swung his sword and slashed at Jaden. Perfect timing. With a loud growl, Jaden suddenly raised his snake spear. Layers of internal momentum appeared on the snake spear, especially on its tip. A faint blood texture was also visible. Murdering godly way. Flying ghost stab. An extremely strong killing intent spread out and surrounded Zen completely. Then, Jaden's snake spear dashed towards Zen like a rocket. In the blink of an eye, the snake spear stabbed him non-stop and left a shadow every time. It looked like a bunch of bloody flowers blooming in his hand. But none of the spear strikes hurt Zen. The 8 smoky melodies combined with the truth of cultivation nature was a miraculous skill. Zen's body was able to dodge the snake spear every single time it was about to pierce him. He was saved in the nick of time, every time. Interesting. Zen's body movement skills were fantastic, but his opponent was a top-level demi-holy being. After the attack failed, Jaden figured out another way to deal with Zen. He calmly and deliberately drew back his snake spear. This time, his snake spear didn't stab Zen, but instead it jabbed all around with Zen in the center. Zen's body movement skills were exquisite, but it was still only the ordinary 8 smoky melodies. And he had just fused it with the truth of godly way, making it a bit magical. But this body movement skill had a fatal disadvantage: it could only borrow the power of others to dodge. Once Jaden figured out this disadvantage, he changed his tactic and began slashing with the snake spear around Zen, restricting his movements to a small radius. Matthew, this guy has nowhere to dodge. You can attack now, Jaden said to Matthew, gesturing with his snake spear. If it wasn't for Jaden's aid, Matthew might have been cut in half by Zen. Are you only relying on the incomparable power and unpredictable body movement skill? A contemptuous smile appeared once again on Matthew's mouth. Among the consummate true gods, you are indeed outstanding. But how did you think you could defeat us only by these methods? So every time Jaden's snake spear came at Zen, his body trembled a bit, but it couldn't move out of Jaden's range of control. Even as he was busy fighting, Zen replied defiantly, "Yes, so what? Then you underestimate us." Matthew raised his arm again and the golden runes that were scattered everywhere swirled around again, clinging and condensing. They once again turned into the invisible incantation sword. As Matthew pointed at the golden sword with his finger, a stronger godly way internal momentum emanated from it and it vibrated. Buzz! A dazzling golden light burst forth, as if a star was born out of nowhere. The dark water area lived up to its name. It was the darkest, gloomiest place ever, but at this moment, those areas within a radius of 10 miles were illuminated as if it was daytime. I also possess powerful strength, and the difference between me and the holy beings is that the holy beings have an immortal body. However, in terms of strength only, few holy beings can defeat me. Matthew proclaimed coldly. The holy beings' bodies were connected with the universes to produce immortal bodies. The demi-holy beings yearned for this ability all the time. No matter how powerful the demi-holy being was, there was only one chance for them to live. However, if a holy being was killed or died, they could be revived again. Their abilities decided the value of their lives. Buzz. Matthew lifted his sword gently and the golden light shifted along the sword, as if the golden star on the sword was also under his control. If that's all you have to rely on, then go ahead and get killed, said Matthew indifferently. Nicholas had ordered them to chase Zen. If he could get caught alive, it would be great. But if they failed to do that, then they were given orders to directly kill him. It was obvious that Matthew didn't want to leave Zen alive. He thrust his sword at Zen without hesitation. Golden Destruction Strike. Swish. The blinding golden starlight went straight for Zen. This sword attack is very powerful, but it can't kill me. Can I make such a judgment using the latent theurgy? At this moment, Zen was still chatting with number 9527 at leisure. In addition to the killing intent counterattack, he also had another latent theurgy in his mind, the wind cloud escape. When he faced a death threat, this latent theurgy would move him to a safe distance to avoid danger. Zen was also curious to know how the latent theurgy could distinguish between danger and safety. Could the latent theurgy really make its own judgments? I guess you can, number 9527 replied. It's not difficult for the latent theurgy to make it. Now that the wind cloud escape wasn't working, Zen naturally felt that even though the dazzling starlight was powerful, he might be able to withstand it. Phew. Zen also raised his hand and held the shadow-bearing sword horizontally against his chest. The emotion in his eyes disappeared in an instant, and a cold temperament arose between his eyebrows. Emotion closing godly way. Just as Zen issued the command, a pair of dark eyes peeped out from under the dark water, observing all of this. No matter how fierce the fight was, the eyes were abnormally calm, and remained indifferent to the entire affair. However, when Zen employed the emotion closing godly way, the black eyes narrowed sharply in disbelief. Emotion closing godly way. How can it be? Is this godly way already allowed in the divine land? Chapter 2348, Plan to kill Zen. The black eyes continued to stare at Zen, as the man tried to gauge some clues from him. Just then, Zen suddenly raised his long sword. He was about to implement a simple yet powerful sword skill. The god's intimidating strike. As Zen's understanding of the emotion closing godly way deepened, other different skills that he had combined in the swordsmanship also increased. Powerful force, Wei's blending energy, and more pure killing move were some of the skills that he had infused. But the god's intimidating strike continued to be the foundation of his sword skills. At first, the man that was hiding in the black water looked mildly perplexed looking at Zen's sword. Almost immediately, his eyes lit up after seeing the god's intimidating strike. It seemed like all his doubts cleared up. Phew, the more Zen merged the godly ways perfectly, the more powerful the Wei's blending energy became. As Zen slashed his sword, there arose a faint ray of radiance that began to spread out. Moreover, Matthew had every intention to kill Zen with his golden destruction strike. He was determined to hack him into pieces this time. No matter how powerful consummate true gods were, they too had limited abilities. Matthew didn't expect that Zen would be able to resist his sword strike. However, when the two rays of sword radiance clashed with each other, Matthew's confidence wavered a bit. Zen was in no way an ordinary warrior at consummation of true god realm. If Matthew, a top-level demi-holy being, was defeated by Zen, he would be thoroughly humiliated. Hiss. The two rays of sword radiance collided with such force that an ear-piercing sound was created, enough to tear open one's eardrums. At the same time, the point where the swords collided, red golden light spots appeared. These light spots were shooting in all directions at an extremely fast speed. Some light spots fell on Jaden's body, leaving behind some nasty wounds. Unable to withstand the violent shooting, Jaden gave up the idea of trapping Zen with his snake spear and started to retreat. Matthew's golden destruction strike should be more than enough to kill Zen, he thought as he stepped back. However, Matthew was finding it difficult to be so optimistic. He stared at the golden and white sword radiance with a grim look on his face. It was going to be a tough challenge to bring down Zen. Earlier, his golden destruction strike had the upper hand. In the blink of an eye, it had swallowed 1/3 of the white sword radiance. However, halfway through the swallowing, the golden destruction strike suddenly started to shrink in size. And the god's intimidating strike that Zen had slashed out was getting vicious by the minute. Golden destruction strike is a unique skill of the demi-holy being of the Mu clan. It is hard to overcome such a strong skill. In the divine land, however, what can be a match for the sword skill produced by the emotion-closing godly way? The pair of eyes in the black water continued to watch the scene above the surface. Seeing the two rays of sword radiance intertwine with each other, the man had already made a decision. And sure enough, in the blink of an eye, the sword radiance of the golden destruction strike suddenly disappeared without a trace. While the white sword radiance of the god's intimidating strike went straight to Matthew. Humph, Matthew snorted coldly. He reluctantly admitted that he was inferior to Zen in such a fight. All of a sudden, he swung the invisible incantation sword once again. The golden destruction strike was one of Matthew's most powerful moves. But it consumed a lot of internal momentum. Even as a demi-holy being, he could at most perform only 3 strikes in a row. If he forced his cinnabar field to release more strikes, he would rapidly lose the internal momentum in his body. Thereby, it would need his life vitality to make up for it, which would in turn damage the foundation of his inner world. But my second strike should definitely kill him. After all, he is only a consummate true god. I am sure the strike he just made was his last attempt. It's impossible for him to make a second strike. No matter how talented he is, he can't escape death after all. Matthew thought with amusement. Swish, the second golden destruction strike shot out. But as soon as the sword radiance materialized, Matthew's expression froze. He just couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. What the heck? No way this could be happening. Zen swung his shadow-bearing sword directly at Matthew. Streaks of white sword radiance formed strands of silk threads as they floated in the air. They soon formed a complicated angle and slashed at Matthew. In a lightning speed, Zen had produced 7 or 8 strikes. Retreat. Matthew's face twitched again, as a thought occurred to him. Was this fellow really a consummate true god and not a holy being? Zen had not left his name on the mountain of holy beings, or else Matthew would have doubted that he was a holy being's disguise. However, this question flashed through his mind only for a second. Now, he was furiously retreating back. Swish, swish, the sword radiance had already swallowed his golden destruction strike. And he was about to be drowned by Zen's strikes. Jaden, who stood not far away, put one hand on Matthew's shoulder and a snake spear flew out. Every time the snake spear hit the air, a huge whirlpool would appear. Jaden repeated the strike more than 10 times, and soon a dozen huge whirlpools appeared between Zen and them. Swirling at high speed, the whirlpools dispersed Zen's sword radiance across all directions. Somehow, he successfully stopped Zen's attack. But Zen had been determined to give his all in the fight and had no intention to spare the 2 demi-holy beings. As he narrowed his eyes, thunder wings appeared on his back. As the wings flapped furiously, he rushed towards the 2 demi-holy beings. On the desperation plane, Samuel bowed to Nicholas in the distance and said through his life vitality, "Nicholas, my son and daughters are in trouble. I have to go save them." With these words, he flew to the left side of the desperation plane. Nicholas continued to fight fiercely against Gallio. So far, he had the upper hand, with the help from Murphy and Clark. But the fiend's recovery was so remarkable that it soon became a seesaw battle. Nicholas wanted to keep Samuel at the desperation plane, but Samuel had every right to save his children, so he couldn't stop him from leaving. Whoosh! After rushing out of the desperation plane, Samuel turned into a cyan light and rapidly flew towards the black water. Pascal started to retreat, but did not run away. Samuel could find Zen quickly with Pascal's help. He couldn't let out the secret of his identity. Once Nicholas knew about it, it would be a catastrophe. The safest way out was to kill Zen as fast as possible. That was why he quickly left the desperation plane, regardless of Nicholas's suspicion. If I were the leader of the union of powerful clans on the floating islands, I would surely treasure a talent like you. But it's a pity that I am not the leader and you already know too much. Samuel's eyes were full of killing intent. He personally did not despise Zen. Furthermore, Zen's performance was outstanding. If Zen joined the Han clan, he would certainly be put in an important position. Now in order to make sure nothing would go wrong, Samuel had no option but to kill Zen. Chapter 2349, Instant Kill. Despite Zen's aggressive attack, it took time for Matthew to be convinced he was inferior. Zen might be good at practicing sword strikes, but would probably not be able to beat Matthew. What was more, Matthew had Jaden's help now, which meant that they could even defeat a holy being together. Annoyed, Matthew had chosen to fight Zen again head-on. But the result was cruel and not something that he had expected to happen. After his invisible incantation sword had disappeared again, Zen had cut off his hand with one strike of his sword. If Jaden hadn't pulled him on time, Zen might have cut him in half. It was only then that Matthew began to believe that he was indeed no match for Zen. Jaden, on the other hand, understood much more than Matthew did. It was true that Matthew was more powerful than Jaden, but Jaden was much more far-sighted than Matthew. Even as Zen was employing the emotion-closing godly way, Jaden was planning to retreat. According to him, the passageway from the 6th stage to the upper stage had already been closed, so even if Zen had a pair of wings, he still wouldn't be able to leave the Abyss Demon region. It's not shameful that we didn't catch Zen. If Nicholas takes control of the Abyss Demon region, it will be easy for us to kill him. Why would we have to risk our lives to fight this guy? Jaden thought. But Matthew was a stubborn man. Now he wouldn't be able to deal with Zen, who was chasing him down. Golden sword condensation, Matthew yelled. He was firm about the fact that he would fight. So what if he had only one arm? His eyes gleamed with fighting intent. The invisible incantation sword had blocked him several times now. But Zen uttered a single word, break. The explosive power on the shadow-bearing sword suddenly increased tenfold. The golden sword shattered and turned into golden runes again. Zen was about to launch an attack when Jaden raised his snake spear and stabbed it at Zen yet again, from a different angle this time. Zen was taken aback. It was true that he could kill Matthew with a sword strike. But if he did so, the snake spear would pierce his body and he'd either die or become seriously injured. He knew that it was unwise for him to injure himself so badly in such a dangerous place as the Abyss Demon region. He had to dodge Jaden's attack. He is still a demi-holy being. Zen thought. Zen hadn't taken their strength seriously before this. But he had come to realize that their visions and judgments were far from anything an ordinary consummate true god could match up to. Zen took a step backwards just as Jaden charged at him with his snake spear, his eyes flashing dangerously. Swish! The snake spear began to spin at an incredible speed, a terrifying explosive force forming around it. Zen was surprised to see Jaden launch the deadly attack after having restrained himself for so long. But he knew he couldn't panic right now. Zen had no intention of changing his mind. But he raised the shadow-bearing sword in his hand so that it was horizontal in the air between him and Jaden. He flicked the shadow-bearing sword, using 7 moves in a row to dispel Jaden's attack. Okay. The excitement in the eyes hidden in the dark water grew. The owner of the eyes was not only pleased at Zen's swordsmanship, but also awed. He had created the god's intimidating strike, but it was not complete. Except for the most formidable sword strike, this sword skill still had many shortcomings. And every one of Zen's moves was a perfect match. It looked like he was born for the emotion-closing godly way. The owner of the eyes within the dark water didn't know that the simple swordsmanship that Zen had cultivated was suitable to the god's intimidating strike, which was why Zen had succeeded in cultivating the emotion-closing godly way. His achievement in swordsmanship had reached its peak after he watched and learned the beginning swordsmanship. Jaden's series of fatal attacks didn't work on Zen, but he didn't regret using them on him. He pushed Zen back for a distance and then returned to Matthew so that they could run away. Zen merely clenched his teeth as he watched. But at this moment, a ray of cyan light flashed in the distance. A holy being. Jaden squinted, trying to see who had made an appearance. As he spotted the figure, astonishment and vigilance took their places on his face. Samuel. Matthew laughed and said, "Great. A holy being is coming. He is the holy being of the Han clan. I don't think you have the ability to survive a holy being's attack." Matthew had wanted to kill Zen as soon as possible, but he was not strong enough to defeat him. And now that a holy being had appeared, he was overjoyed and didn't seem like a demi-holy being at all. However, Jaden was thinking differently. Nicholas had allowed Samuel to enter the Abyss Demon region, but he had always been skeptical of him. Samuel had been arrogant before. After he had brought the Han clan onto a floating island, he had turned down the generous invitation from the union of the powerful clans and hadn't even taken Nicholas seriously. But his attitude had changed a lot over the past few decades, which made others suspicious of him. Swish! He was dozens of miles away, but Samuel had sent something towards them. The cyan light swept across the 50 miles between them and shot towards Zen. It split the space between Zen and the 2 demi-holy beings, forcing Zen to retreat. Zen's expression shifted into one of wariness as he watched the light split the space. Zen knew he could win against a demi-holy being, but he had no idea how to deal with a real holy being. What was more, Samuel was also one of the strongest holy beings, which was why he had fought alone and made the Han clan become one of the top 10 powerful clans in the past. It took Samuel only 6 seconds to reach Matthew and Jaden. "Thank you for your help," Matthew said, bringing his hands together in respect and gratitude. Everyone could call Samuel, Holy Samuel, out of respect. But Samuel was not in a high position in the alliance of powerful clans, which was why he wasn't qualified to be conferred the title. Samuel fixed his gaze on Zen as he smiled and said to Matthew, "Who said I was helping you?" Matthew was confused. Jaden's brow furrowed as he thought for a little while, instinct telling him that something was wrong. "What are you talking about?" Matthew asked. Samuel said calmly, "I was worried that if Zen didn't kill you completely, wisps of your souls might escape and return. It would be a problem if that happened, wouldn't it?" Jaden and Matthew were shocked at Samuel's words. They weren't stupid to not see that something bad was about to happen. Seeing that the demi-holy beings were about to escape, Samuel clenched both his hands and sent two killing forces towards them. Matthew had barely opened his mouth when the force struck him and he shattered into pieces. "How dare you!" cried Jaden angrily, but before he could say anything else, his body also shattered into 1,000 pieces. Chapter 2350, Help! Large chunks of flesh fell from the sky, landing in the black water. Neither of the two demi-holy beings had a chance of escaping. Both their bodies and souls had already been killed. Samuel's hands maintained their previous posture as he stood above the black, flowing water, staring at Zen with an indifferent glare. On the other hand, Zen's expression became rather gloomy all of a sudden. Of course, he was well aware that Samuel wasn't weak. That said, the method used was far beyond any of his expectations. Samuel had simply and casually released his strength, instantly killing two top-level demi-holy beings. It was absolutely incredible. It was safe to say that he just might be as powerful as Nicholas. "You shouldn't have revealed my identity." Samuel stared at Zen calmly as a trace of killing intent began to form in his eyes. "Nicholas is my enemy, too. I'll eventually kill him sooner or later. You shouldn't have sacrificed your daughters." Zen stared back at Samuel angrily. His aura was by no means inferior to Samuel's. Both of them had the same goal, to say the least. Zen, on his behalf, wasn't going to stoop to his level and wouldn't cross the line. There was no way he was going to achieve his goal by sacrificing Laquisha and Elena. On the contrary, however, Samuel resorted to every other possibly conceivable means. "Are you trying to say I should place my hope in you?" The corners of Samuel's lips curled into a smirk and a look of mockery was quick to appear on his face. Samuel appreciated Zen, but he was clear on the fact that expecting Zen to rise and kill Nicholas was nothing more than a daydream. He himself had lived long enough to fulfill two lives. Thus, he knew that he couldn't trust anyone, at any time. As he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air abruptly. Divine weapon. The space was immediately torn open by Samuel and the wide crack quickly began to condense itself, turning into a pitch-black spear. Samuel grabbed the black spear in his hand, pointed its tip at Zen and said, "Everything I've lost will be paid back by Nicholas, multiplied by 10 or even 100 times. As for you, I'd better kill you first. In the future, whether I can bring you back to life or not will depend solely on my mood." As soon as he took notice of the black spear, Zen's expression changed at once. Here, in the Abyss Demon region, the space law was prohibited in every way, shape and form. Apart from the space channels built by the fiends, even a holy being was completely incapable of using the grand teleportation technique. Despite such, Zen clearly sensed an extremely strong space law power emitting itself from Samuel's black spear. "Your spear has developed beyond the Abyss Demon region's restrictions," Zen stated flatly, as he furrowed his brow. "Ha ha, like I've said before, you know absolutely nothing. Why would you even get involved in this matter?" Phew. Samuel launched his arm upward, his spear slicing through the air. As he performed this action, a black light also shot out from around the spear's tip. The black light gradually spread out in a narrow fan shape, zooming past Zen's ear and extending hundreds of thousands of feet away. When the fan-shaped space had extended far enough, both sides shut together instantly, like a huge pair of scissors. The space transformed into a thin black line right before their eyes. If Zen had been standing within the fan-shaped space, his head would have been sliced straight off. The Spear of Supreme Harmony should be at the top, even among the Abyss Demon region's faith weapons, Samuel said as he looked at Zen's expression with satisfaction. For a long time, Nicholas had outshone him greatly, and in many different ways. The younger generation of the Floating Island's powerful clans simply didn't take him seriously anymore. Now, he was trying his very best to get his dignity back, especially in front of Zen. Faith weapon. Zen's eyes flashed as these words met his ears. Seeing the black spear had disobeyed the Abyss Demon region's rules, Zen had come up with his own hypothesis, but in his heart, he didn't expect it to be true. "In my previous life, I obtained this faith weapon in the Abyss Demon region, and I equally successfully escaped from this place. In other words, it's safe to say that I really have great luck." A crazy look flashed on Samuel's face, just long enough for Zen to notice it. "I need to control much more than just the Abyss Demon region." As he finished his sentence, he disappeared in the blink of an eye, the spear of supreme harmony still in his hand. The grand teleportation. Secretly, Zen was feeling very shocked. No one else could use the grand teleportation, but Samuel, on the other hand, was using it with ease. This was all too much for Zen to accept at once. Almost subconsciously, he sank deeply, in a sharp, straight line. Whoosh! In the open void, the spear of supreme harmony suddenly thrust forward, sweeping past Zen's head and missing him by only a couple inches. "I must say, I'm impressed by your quick response. Can you really avoid it every time, though?" As soon as Samuel stepped out of the void, he stepped immediately into it again. Before he could fully enter the void, the spear attempted to stab Zen in the face, catching him off guard by coming from another direction. Such a method was actually rather mysterious. Whoosh! The 8 smoky melodies. Unexpectedly, Zen's body became unusually flexible, like a malleable piece of paper, floating against the spear of supreme harmony. What an interesting bodily movement skill. I've never seen anything like it before. Jaden could easily figure out a way to defeat Zen's bodily movement skill, not to mention Samuel. As he turned his back to Zen, he tried stabbing him several times in a row once again. Each stab was futile, however. Each stab did nothing more than break through the void and appear around Zen. Buzz! After 12 repetitive stabs, the spear's tip created several vertical and horizontal space cracks around Zen. It only took a split second for these space cracks to form a square space cage, completely trapping Zen inside. "Ha ha, I wonder how you'll escape this time, huh?" Samuel laughed mockingly. Trapped inside the cage's 4 walls, Zen didn't have any space to dodge anymore. That said, it didn't mean he could do nothing. In his hands, Samuel held the spear of supreme harmony, and Zen had the jade seal, which could erase time. Despite its power, the jade seal wasn't enough to help Zen escape from the cage at this point in time. In fact, the jade seal could only erase a short period of time. If Samuel truly wanted to kill Zen, then he'd have to launch a complete saturation attack. If he attacked Zen without stopping in a short period of time, he'd successfully take Zen's life. In such a case, it would be impossible for Zen to turn the tables, even if he did succeed in erasing time. In spite of his unfortunate position, Zen still had the wind cloud escape for use, one of the latent thurgies. Although the space law was prohibited in the Abyss Demon region, the wind cloud escape remained an extraordinary thurgy. Zen genuinely believed that this technique would help him escape such a horrid place. But, why isn't the wind cloud escape triggered? Zen mumbled, questioning himself. As soon as Samuel thrust his spear out into the void, it headed directly for Zen in a dangerously straight line. Phew! Out of the blue, the once calm black water suddenly began to move, larger and larger waves crashing into each other. A sharp, thin line broke the black water's silence and slashed upward. Crack, click. Without the slightest deviation, the thin line broke the space cage that was binding Zen immediately, and then landed directly on the spear of supreme harmony. The thin line was so incredibly powerful that for a few moments, Samuel felt unable to hold the spear in his own 2 hands. "The emotion closing godly way?" Zen questioned. For a while, he was utterly stunned. He was very familiar with the emotion closing godly way's internal momentum. He couldn't believe his own 2 eyes. From within the line, Zen could feel the internal momentum hidden inside. This was true, even if his eyes were closed. What was more, the internal momentum was simply perfect. There was no other way to describe it. Obviously, it had come from a very advanced stage. Just like the Black Eye's owner was shocked when he saw Zen use the emotion-closing godly way, Zen was also extremely shocked right now. As this emotion washed over him, someone came to his mind. Sword Chen practiced the god's intimidating strike as well as the emotion-closing godly way. What was more, he had traveled to the Abyss Demon region, but no one knew whether he was dead or alive. Chapter 2351, Going into the Water. Needless to say, Sword Chen was an extremely talented character in the evolutionary universe. Not many outranked him, and very few ever would. Since he was capable of escaping to the Abyss Demon region, it was safe to assume that his cultivation level couldn't have been very weak at the time. Despite everything, at least he was a top rank or even a consummate true god. It didn't matter. The Abyss Demon region was known to be very dangerous, and it didn't make any exceptions for anyone. Even if he was a demi-holy being or holy being, he simply couldn't survive in the abyss demon region, let alone the fact that he was merely a consummate true god at most. After all, he had never been to the mountain of holy beings. In other words, it was completely impossible for him to become a holy being through cultivating on his own. It would take much more than that. One after the next, many ideas flashed through Zen's mind. He could see them, but he couldn't confirm any of them. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, countless black, thin lines all came out from the deep, dark water at once. The black thin lines moved at an extremely fast speed, like long, skinny hairs. They rolled toward Samuel and Zen, who were both surprised. Anyone who was caught by the black thin lines would be cut straight in half. Despite his fear, with the spear of supreme harmony in his hands, Samuel dodged the black thin lines with ease. The black thin lines had a single, very clear purpose, to force Samuel into backing up. Zen stood still, utterly motionless, and yet, all the thin lines flew around him without even touching him. Come down now. As soon as Samuel was forced backward, a voice was suddenly transmitted into Zen's head through life vitality. Without a moment's hesitation, Zen's body began to sink. Although he had latent thurgies at his access, he would avoid their use as long as he possibly could. Whoosh! Zen had descended extremely quickly, but there was no way Samuel would let him off the hook that easily. Once again, the spear of supreme harmony in Samuel's hand slashed out violently. Swish, 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 swish. The spear slashed through the air. In the blink of an eye, the spear of supreme harmony transformed itself into countless spear shadows that pierced straight into the void. Zen glanced below him and he saw the spear shadows penetrating up toward him. He knew he was in a dangerous position. At the same time, Samuel took a confident step forward, bypassed the black thin lines with a few side steps, and suddenly appeared directly above Zen. He knew that Zen could use the 8 smoky melodies to perfectly dodge his spear attack, and therefore, for the entire round of attack, he never let his guard down, not even once. While Zen attempted to walk out of the void, Samuel shot down the sky above. An incredibly strong force suddenly pressed down on him from above, while underneath him, countless spear shadows from the spear of supreme harmony were rushing upward. Beneath such absurd pressure, even if Zen used the 8 smoky melodies, his body would still be pressed onto the spear's tip and the spear shadows would thus shoot through him. It doesn't matter if someone comes to your rescue now. If he helps you, he'll simply die too. A cold expression appeared on Samuel's face, as his lips curled into an unpleasant smile. The attack that rose from beneath the black water took Samuel by absolute surprise. Although it was quite a fierce attack, it still wasn't enough to frighten Samuel into backing out. In fact, he thought to himself, after killing Zen, he just might fight with the fellow under the black water. In spite of the strain being placed on him, Zen turned himself around and smiled faintly at Samuel above. It seems that you have a bad memory. Perhaps Samuel didn't think very highly of Zen, and he thus seemed to have forgotten what Zen was truly capable of. As he noticed the calm expression on Zen's face, Samuel became suspicious. Could he really have forgotten certain details about Zen? Even more importantly, the pair of black eyes out in the black water also appeared anxious all of a sudden. What was going on? He had been hiding under the black water for so many years now. His strength had greatly advanced of course, and he had also mastered a few extremely powerful methods. Under the current circumstances, however, he was unable to save Zen, even if he wanted to. The only way he'd even come close to helping him was if Zen could descend into the black water. The spear shadows were unbelievably dense though, and this caused a high risk for Zen. The spear could impale and heavily damage his body. As the pair of black eyes and Samuel both stared Zen down, blood began to spurt from Zen's chest. Within seconds, his legs, waist, head, and abdomen were equally bleeding freely. Puff, puff, puff. Blood kept streaming down his body in pulses, following the rhythm of his heart. Disappointment revealed itself in the pair of black eyes and something occurred to Samuel. Every single wound that had appeared on Zen's body had disappeared in an instant. It was like an optical illusion that never really existed, and Samuel and the black eyes were only witnesses to the scene. Phew! Samuel waved his arm high in the air again and activated the spear of supreme harmony at once, in an attempt to kill Zen. It was just too late. Nothing could be done. Plop! Zen dove into the black water with a splash. Puff, puff, puff. By the time Zen was deep beneath the black water's surface, a countless number of spear shadows had landed on the water's surface. Had it been any other ordinary area of water, the stabs from Samuel's spear would have been more than enough to cause raging waves that pierced all the way to the bottom. In fact, dozens of stabs were more than enough to turn over an entire sea. Each time his spear pierced into the black water, however, it was like a sticky glue, causing nothing more than a few faint, weak ripples. As he continued to stab and press downward, a strange force spread into the black water. It was as if the force was fighting Samuel for the spear. Every time he thrust his spear into the thick, glue-like water, the force coming from below would double. With the last few stabs, the force seemed to have grown even stronger than Samuel's. He knew he couldn't continue in such a way. Under such circumstances, Samuel had no choice but to give up stabbing into the black water. Otherwise, his spear of supreme harmony would be taken away by the invisible force before he could even kill Zen. That said, Zen now knew his secret, which would pose serious problems for the future. Samuel hovered above the black water for a while, and then coldly shouted, "Don't ever let me see you in the abyss demon region again. If you show up, I'll kill you. Trust me." Every inch of the black water suddenly looked like a tormenting dead pool of blackness. If people were to use their spiritual sense in order to cover the black water with an area of hundreds of thousands of miles, they would find that the surface of the black water was absolutely calm and without any waves. It was extremely weird. Nothing of the sort had ever been seen in other places. Probing deeper with the spiritual sense was therefore impossible. No matter how strong the spiritual sense really was, the black water would swallow it whole as soon as it came into contact with its chillingly dangerous waves. Samuel, on his behalf, had equally noticed the black water's problem. He had no desire to stay here any longer. He tossed the spear of supreme harmony lightly. Once the long black spear was well hidden in the void, Samuel retreated to the west of the black water. In the black water, something strange was happening. Zen felt himself being dragged downward, as though a hand had clasped tightly around his ankle. At the same time, a dried voice sounded out from below him. "What's your name?" the voice asked. Needless to say, both sides had already guessed at each other's identities. Now, it was time to verify their hypothesis. "My name is Zen Luo," Zen stated in a flat tone. As he spoke his name aloud, the hand that held onto him suddenly trembled. The man's voice asked back, "Do you come from the evolutionary universe?" Zen asked, a smile now plastered on his face, "Are you Sword Chen, the Killing Sword Mountain's master?" Strictly speaking, Sword Chen was actually Zen's master. After all, he had learned the god's intimidating strike from him. For a short while, the man kept silent, and then burst out laughing. His laughter was full of life and joy, as though the depression that had overwhelmed him for countless years had finally disappeared with the snap of his fingers. "It seems that after all these years, I've finally got something in return," the man mumbled. Chapter 2352, Under the Black Water. Sword Chen sighed, suddenly sensing something. He talked to Zen through his life vitality, "Hide your aura. Something is coming." Heeding this instruction, Zen hid all his aura. They floated in the black water, as motionlessly as they could. Then Zen felt a wave emerge from the thick black water. He knew that there was probably a huge monster swimming in the black water, swilling the water around and forming an undercurrent. The mere manner in which the undercurrent reached Zen terrified him. Zen's heart seemed to stop beating in that moment. The hair on his back stood on end, and his mood began to fluctuate violently. He had tried his best to restrain himself, but fear had prodded his instincts. And now, he was trying to gather all his strength and hit back. At that moment, Sword Chen put a hand on Zen's shoulder. A warm current flowed from his palm and into Zen's shoulder, causing him to feel immediate relief. Zen had the sudden feeling of returning home, as if he had, all this while, been in a cold, frozen land, and then spring had made its appearance again. His fear had disappeared as well. He had experienced this feeling before, when he had faced fear incarnations in the debate venue. But it hadn't been as strong as it was now. The undercurrent disappeared after a while, and the monster was also a significant distance away. It was only then that Sword Chen released Zen. "What was that? Is there a monster in the black water?" Zen asked. "No," replied Sword Chen. "No," Zen repeated, puzzled. He had clearly sensed a huge monster just moments ago. And now, Sword Chen was saying that there was no ferocious monster here. What was Zen to make of this contradiction? "Do you know what the black water is?" Sword Chen asked. "No, I don't," Zen replied. He only knew that the black water, like the magnetic sacred mountain, was extremely complex. It would weaken all kinds of energy that were poured into it. Neither Laquisha's fire nor Samuel's spear worked in the black water. "This is the Sea of Meditation," said Sword Chen. Sea of Meditation. To the west of the Desperation Plain was the Reincarnation Land. To the east was the black water. This must be the Sea of Meditation. But the name didn't matter. Zen memorized it and waited for Sword Chen to give further explanation. That thing is not a ferocious monster. It is referred to as the unknown in the Sea of Meditation, Sword Chen explained. Zen was still confused. What is the unknown? Sword Chen smiled, knowing that Zen would ask this question, and continued, not all fears have forms. What we fear most is usually colorless and formless. It is just a concept. For example, when you suffer sleep paralysis, you feel that something is pressing down on your body, but in fact, there is nothing. What makes you scared is the unknown. The Abyss Demon region was a gathering of all the fears in the Divine Land. Like other forbidden lands, all the monsters here had their sources and legends. There were fiends, abyss demons, sea monsters, and all kinds of ferocious beasts. They were truly illusory, formed by faith energy. However, the divine citizens fabricated them. The fears didn't really exist in many cases. As Sword Chen had said, some fears were formless. Formless fears were also a kind of faith energy, and the creatures that were formed by this kind of faith energy could be found in the Sea of Meditation. So the unknown won't harm us. They'll only scare us. Zen's heart fluttered with fear. He had experienced life and death. Even in the most desperate situations, he never was scared because he knew that fear was useless and would only push him into adversity. But in the face of the unknown just now, Zen's fear was instinctively awakened, and he couldn't find a way to stop it. Without Sword Chen's warmth, Zen would probably become desperate enough to attack the unknown. Scare us. Ha ha. Sword Chen chuckled mirthlessly and then asked Zen, it is said in the Divine Land that fiends rule the Abyss Demon region, right? Isn't it true? Zen asked back. There was no doubt that the Abyss Demon region was home to fiends. Even the most powerful fiends shiver with fear in the Sea of Meditation. They'd die here if they aren't careful enough. They can be reborn, but once they die, they will have to start all over again, said Sword Chen. Zen's eyebrows went up at this information. He suddenly felt that hiding in this place was not a good choice. Fortunately, Sword Chen had been hiding here for a number of years, so he must be very familiar with the Sea of Meditation. He could probably ensure their safety to a certain extent. Zen thought for a moment and asked, why do the fiends come here if this place is so dangerous? The fiends seem to have lost interest in the reincarnation land since they couldn't enter it. The Sea of Meditation was dangerous, making it impossible for the fiends to come to it. This is the cultivation place of fiends. If they want to be stronger, they must come here, Sword Chen answered. The cultivation place of fiends. Do the fiends still need to practice? Zen became even more puzzled at this. The monsters would become stronger and stronger as long as they stayed in the Forbidden Lands, because they had an inexhaustible source of faith energy there. Another way of becoming stronger was to devour other beasts, a way in which they could get extra faith energy quickly. Of course, it's necessary, Sword Chen said, calming down. If the fiends only relied on faith energy, they wouldn't have the strength they have now. They would have been just some obscure monsters. But in the Sea of Meditation, they can come in contact with the most wonderful ideas, some even beyond the limitation of the Divine Land. Zen's heart skipped a beat at this. He had heard the strange fish mention that the fiends were looking for a way to leave the Abyss Demon region. This was impossible, because it violated the rules of the Divine Land. And according to what Sword Chen was saying, did the fiends find the way out of the Abyss Demon region through the Sea of Meditation? The moment Sword Chen finished talking, Zen felt the pressure around him loosen and he stepped into a space he couldn't quite explain. The black water that had clung to his body peeled and flowed away from him like reeling silk from cocoons. Chapter 2353, The Way of Survival Underwater. Before, Zen had been shrouded by thick dark water that had completely blocked Sword Chen from his sight. Now, after entering this space, he finally laid eyes on Sword Chen. Covered in rags with messy hair and dirty skin, Sword Chen looked like a beggar. He looked nothing like the man Zen had met in the corridor of Emperor years ago. The only thing the person in front of him and the Sword Chen he had met before had in common was the pair of sharp black eyes. They were like two obsidian gemstones shining with dark light. This might not be the first time for you to see me, Sword Chen surmised, turning around. Yes, I once saw you in the corridor of Emperor in the illusion battlefield. Sword Chen nodded his head slightly. The person Zen had encountered in the corridor of Emperor was nothing more than a soul mark that the original Sword Chen had left there. But the soul mark Sword Chen had left there hadn't been as competent as Augustus. When the soul mark Augustus had left in the fairy place was activated, he had immediately learned about Zen's existence. Sword Chen, on the other hand, had had no knowledge of his encounter with Zen. Now, staring at Zen, Sword Chen asked, "What's your relationship with Holy Mike?" He already had a guess that he was more or less sure about, but he still wanted to confirm it. "Mike is my father," Zen answered. "It is just as I thought. So you didn't become my disciple in the corridor of Emperor?" he asked calmly. "Yes," Zen nodded. "I already became Holy Bromley's disciple before that." "Ah, that makes sense. Among the 10 godly geniuses, you are the most important one. Holy Bromley's fairy palace had been reserved for you," Sword Chen muttered to himself. When Sword Chen had still been a supreme lord, he hadn't known about the existence of the fairy palace. By the time he had found out about the plan involving the godly geniuses, he had already come to the divine land. Zen looked around the space they were in. It was a small sphere, and its outermost layer was still fluctuating. "So for the past few years, have you been living in the sea of meditation?" With a bitter smile on his face, Sword Chen said, "To be more precise, I've been living in this small bubble. In the dark water, there are only 4 such bubbles. Anyone who lingers outside these bubbles will be swallowed up by the unknown sooner or later." "The unknown can't enter this bubble?" Zen asked. Sword Chen nodded. "Not just the unknown, the fiends can't enter this bubble either. This bubble belongs only to me." Back then, when Sword Chen had been running away from fierce beasts in the Abyss Demon region, he had accidentally stumbled into the dark water. The beasts that were chasing him were too powerful for him to fight against, so he had decided to continue fleeing by plunging into the dark water. What he hadn't known at that time was that even those fierce beasts didn't dare to enter the dark water. In fact, the beasts had been so afraid of the dark water that they had given up on chasing Sword Chen altogether. In the dark water, he had soon encountered the fear of the unknown. The fear released by the unknown was too overpowering to resist. Extreme fear brought out different reactions in different people. Some people would be so frightened that they would stay in the same place like an ostrich. Some people, like Zen, would be prepared for an all-out battle in the face of such extreme fear, trying to eliminate the source of the fear. Sword Chen, however, had chosen to flee instead. He had run about in the thick dark water, until, thanks to pure luck, he had finally escaped from the unknown after entering a bubble. The very bubble that they were in now. Later, I got to know that these bubbles were built by fiends who had put a great deal of effort into this project. They needed to cultivate in the dark water, and without the protection of these bubbles, they would definitely die, Sword Chen elaborated while stretching out his hand and pointing to the edge of the bubble. A stream of dark water was dragged into the bubble. Then, with a flick of his finger, he drove the stream of dark water out again. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Even after so long, I still don't know how the fiends made these bubbles. Their race is too intelligent." "Didn't any of the fiends come here and trouble you?" Zen asked curiously. In the end, the dark water still belonged to the Abyss Demon region. How could the fiends watch Sword Chen occupy their bubble and do nothing about it? "Of course they did," Sword Chen said, shrugging. "Unfortunately for them, I refined this bubble. They can do nothing but curse me from outside." These bubbles were a kind of space treasure with a special form. After obtaining such waterproof treasures, the powerful fiends had decided to use the dark water as their cultivation place. At that time, they had thought it unlikely for anyone else to enter the dark water, so they had left these bubbles unrefined. By chance, Sword Chen had taken advantage of this loophole and made this bubble his own. "There was a period of time when I was cursed incessantly, and I got so annoyed that I built a divine texture to resist the spiritual sense outside," said Sword Chen with a helpless smile on his face. "If it wasn't for this bubble that gave me a chance to survive, I'm afraid I would have been reincarnated." Reincarnated? When Zen heard this, his eyes suddenly flashed with more curiosity. "You can get reincarnated?" Sword Chen nodded, and with a flick of his hand, a streak of green light appeared on his palm. It was a green butterfly. Although Zen had never seen this butterfly before, he called out its name by instinct, the jade scale butterfly. "I never expected that you would have it." "You have been to the reincarnation land?" asked Sword Chen. "Yes, I entered the Abyss Demon region through the reincarnation land," Zen explained. In the reincarnation land, there were 3 altars. When Zen had first seen them, he had been confused to note that there were no statues on 2 of the altars. He had wondered where the jade scale butterfly and the flame blood vulture could be in the divine land, but he had never expected that one of those things would be in Sword Chen's hands. In this bubble, there were no other cultivation resources available to Sword Chen. However, his cultivation method was similar to Laquisha's. For the past few years, he had used the jade scale butterfly to approach the memory flames and absorb the cultivation memory of the memory flames little by little. In this way, he had improved step by step and become a demi-holy being. You entered the Abyss Demon region through the reincarnation land, but why were you hunted by Samuel and his group? Sword Chen was a little confused. Although he had the jade scale butterfly, he could not use it to search the memory flames at will like Zen could do with his reincarnation soul weapon, so he didn't know the recent happenings in the divine land. Zen quickly filled him in about everything that was happening. Nicholas has joined forces with the powerful clans on the floating islands to conquer the Abyss Demon region. Sword Chen repeated. After thinking for a while, he narrowed his eyes and said with a cold smile, "It seems that the clever Nicholas can also be stupid sometimes. This might be an opportunity for us." Chapter 2354, Use the Sea of Meditation. An opportunity? What do you mean? Zen asked with a puzzled look on his face. Sword Chen's eyes, however, were sparkling with excitement. Swordsmen were always adamant. Once they made up their minds to do something, they wouldn't give up easily. Sword Chen used to be heroic, but after he was corroded by the black water for so many years, not only had his body taken substantial damage, but he had also become more stubborn. An opportunity to control the Abyss Demon region. Then, Sword Chen raised his eyebrows and looked Zen up and down. Now, we have the perfect opportunity and the perfect candidate. This is simply the arrangement of fate. As a demi-holy being, Sword Chen couldn't control the Abyss Demon region. Even if he was given a chance, he still wouldn't be able to grasp it. Zen, on the other hand, was merely a consummate true god, so he was the perfect candidate for this. Control the Abyss Demon region. Zen chewed over the words with his mouth, his gaze narrowing slightly. Many holy beings, demi-holy beings, and consummate true gods from the union of the powerful clans on the floating islands, like Rocher and Rochelle, had come here this time. The goal of the union was probably to make one of the members gain control over the Abyss Demon region. Zen had fought with Laquisha, Elena and Pascal just now. With the help of number 9527, he had removed the restrictions on Laquisha and Elena. However, Pascal had escaped as fast as he could. Presumably, Samuel was trying to leave at least one behind to take control of the place. The Abyss Demon region was ranked first among the 4 forbidden lands. If Zen could control it, it would be a powerful card in his hands. But it's not that easy to grab control of the Abyss Demon region from the hands of Nicholas and Samuel, Zen said, shaking his head. Nicholas and Samuel had dozens of holy beings and demi-holy beings to help them. It was impossible for Zen to fight against them face to face. If not for the protection of the Black Water and Sword Chen, Zen would already have been on his way to death. The only thing he could have used to escape was the latent Thurges, and even that might not have worked. Samuel and Nicholas are strong, of course. But we don't have to fight against them face to face, said Sword Chen. Even if I have no choice but to confront them head on, I might not lose. Being trapped in the sea of meditation for so many years, you have indeed made great progress in your cultivation. Not many people in the divine land can fight against Samuel directly, Zen noted in slight awe. Samuel was considered one of the most outstanding holy beings. Although Zen had never seen his real strength, he assumed that Samuel was not weaker than Nicholas. So naturally, it came as a surprise to Zen that Sword Chen, who was merely a demi-holy being, was strong enough to take on Samuel. Sword Chen was only a secondary creature from the universe while Mike was only a holy being. Sword Chen shook his head and said, I'm only confident because we are in the Abyss Demon region now. There's no way I can go up against Samuel outside the Abyss Demon region. What do you mean? Zen asked curiously. You have been to the Killing Sword Mountain. Do you know the cultivation method I used in the past? Sword Chen asked. Zen nodded. You used the Killing Sword Mountain to gather malicious aura, with which you could suppress and abandon emotions. Of course, the emotion-closing godly way couldn't be cultivated in this way. It had just been Sword Chen's helpless move in the evolutionary universe, but it had been a very clever one. Zen had gained a great deal from the Killing Sword Mountain, and it was also because of his trip to the Killing Sword Mountain that he had met Lavender. I improved my cultivation base with the help of the Jade Scale Butterfly and became a demi-holy being after creating my own land. But such strength was still not enough in the Abyss Demon region, said Sword Chen. Later, I thought of another way which was similar to the one I used with the Killing Sword Mountain. To become demi-holy beings, consummate true gods had to create their own lands which were fundamentally different from the inner worlds. For example, Joy had built the Purple Sky land using the Purple Aura godly way. Likewise, Sword Chen had built his own land. Both the Purple Sky land and Sword Chen's land could project a part of them into the Divine Land. A similar way, did you build another Killing Sword Mountain here? Zen couldn't make sense of it. The malicious aura in the divine land was not that powerful. Apart from the murdering godly way, it was useless for the other godly ways. That's impossible, said Sword Chen. You can think of the Sea of Meditation as the killing sword mountain. Since becoming a demi-holy being, I have refined 128 longswords. I have inserted them into the Sea of Meditation so that they can absorb the power in the whole sea for my own use. The killing sword mountain gathered and delivered the malicious aura by long swords. There was a great amount of force of primitive fear hidden in the Sea of Meditation. Taking the killing sword mountain as a reference, Sword Chen had used the force of primitive fear in the Sea of Meditation as malicious aura. I see. Zen's eyes flashed. Before, he hadn't been able to understand what was happening. How could Sword Chen, who was merely a demi-holy being, block Samuel's spear? The emotion-closing godly way might be one of the reasons, but it turned out that the key reason was the Sea of Meditation. Young master, you also cultivate the emotion-closing godly way. Although you haven't managed to build your own land, you can still use the power of the Sea of Meditation. I can help you with the sword array, said Sword Chen abruptly. Zen was somewhat confused. Why was Sword Chen calling him, young master? He didn't know the relationship between his father and Sword Chen. He just wondered if Sword Chen was one of the godly geniuses, or maybe a godly genius of the last generation. However, Zen had no time to worry about such trivial matters in the situation they were in, so he put them aside for the time being. I can also set up the sword array. Zen's eyes lit up. According to Sword Chen, Zen could only use the force of primitive fear in the Abyss Demon region, but that itself would be enough. Now, Zen couldn't leave this place as the road to the 5th stage was closed, so taking control of the Abyss Demon region might be the only option he had. Like Sword Chen had said, it was necessary to strengthen himself so that he could fight with the alliance of the powerful clans on the floating islands. Of course you can, young master, Sword Chen replied, nodding his head. As he spoke, he took a step forward and stood at the center of the bubble. With a gentle flick of his hand, a long table appeared horizontally in the bubble. Then, with another wave of his hand, long swords of different styles and lengths appeared on the long table. But the quality of these long swords is poor, and I'm afraid they won't be able to withstand the corrosion from the Sea of Meditation. A hint of helplessness appeared on Sword Chen's face. Although he had countless long swords in his own land, they could only be projected when he used the land. It was impossible to directly take them to the divine land. If he took any long swords out of his own land, they would be restored into life vitality. The long swords that he had conjured up now were only ordinary swords from the divine land. Chapter 2355, Scorching Gold. As a swordsman, Sword Chen was obsessed with all kinds of swords. However, he had been stuck in the Sea of Meditation for too long. Out of all the swords he had, only 3 of them were supreme primordial weapons. Moreover, supreme primordial weapons could be classified into different levels of power. The 3 swords he had were the ordinary kind. And aside from these 3 swords, all the swords he had were regular weapons in the divine land, even ordinary citizens could easily obtain them. These are all I have. I wonder if you have a spare sword? Sword Chen asked, turning to Zen. Of course I do, Zen said with a smile. Then, he went over to the long table and gently tapped the space ring in his hand. Swords fell out of the space ring and scattered all over the table. From the divine land to the prison at the bottom of the chaos, Zen had not been particular about collecting treasures along the way. Whenever he did stumble upon a treasure, however, he would secretly stash it away in his space ring. Every now and then, he would sort out all the items in his space ring and throw away whatever he didn't need, especially common items. Therefore, almost all of the items he had accumulated in his space ring were rare and valuable. Even though he had left some common supreme primordial weapons behind in the fairy palace, there were still quite a number of treasures in his space ring. Clang, clang, clang. Sword Chen's eyes widened as he watched the longswords tumble out of Zen's space ring one after the other. Supreme primordial weapons. There are dozens of long swords, and all of them are supreme primordial weapons. This brown sword seems to be a supreme chaotic weapon. What's the name of this sword? Looking at the excitement on Sword Chen's face, Zen shrugged sheepishly. I don't remember. He had probably gotten this brown sword from the space ring of some wild god, so naturally, he didn't know its name. Moreover, he couldn't understand why a demi-holy being like Sword Chen was being this enthusiastic about a bunch of swords. With Sword Chen's current strength, these swords should be no more than scraps of metal for him. And Zen's line of thought was completely right, of course. With Sword Chen's cultivation and strength, these swords were truly not worth his attention. However, back when Sword Chen had entered the Divine Land, the floating island of the Luo clan had been on the verge of collapsing, so he had been forced to flee into the Abyss Demon region. It was a pity for him that he hadn't had the time to gather all kinds of swords in the Divine Land. So, being a sword fanatic, he couldn't help but feel excited at seeing all these swords after such a long time of being stuck in the sea of meditation. So far, Zen had taken out more than 100 swords from his space ring and piled them up on the table. Moreover, Sword Chen had already mentioned that he had refined 128 longswords and inserted them in the sea of meditation. Are these enough? Zen asked. Yes, of course. Sword Chen touched one of these swords with his hand. It was a longsword that Zen had obtained from the Sword Clan. True to its name, the Sword Clan was obsessed with swordsmanship, and their extraordinary sword refining skills immediately attracted Sword Chen's attention. Can you give this sword to me? Of course. Take anything you like, Zen urged. Under the mop of disheveled hair, a childlike smile appeared on Sword Chen's face. For Zen, it was hard to digest that a sword practitioner could be this captivated by a sword. Do I have to refine all of them? Zen asked, changing the subject. Sword Chen nodded. Let me help you refine these swords. When you insert them into the sea of meditation, you'll only need to activate them. As he spoke, he reached out and patted the long table. Buzz! All of the long swords jumped up from the table. Sword Chen's right hand swiftly swept past them, leaving a mark the size of a thumb on the handle of each sword. In less than half a minute, Sword Chen had finished the preparation work. He then said to Zen, take these swords and follow me into the dark water. Do we still have to enter the dark water? Zen frowned. Although Zen had a general idea of the sea of meditation after Sword Chen's explanation, the force of primitive fear and the unknown hidden in the dark water still made Zen feel uncomfortable. Noticing Zen's hesitant expression, Sword Chen laughed. Don't worry, we are already in the depths of the sea of meditation. The depths of the sea of meditation? Won't there be the unknown here? Zen asked curiously. Sword Chen simply smiled. In the sea of meditation, the unknown are all over the place, he answered mysteriously. Then what are we going to do? Zen asked again. We will have to rely on this, of course, Sword Chen replied, taking out a triangular golden object. As Sword Chen swept his fingers over the surface of the golden object, it started to burn with a dazzling golden light that spread to the whole bubble. The surface of Zen's and Sword Chen's bodies seemed to be coated with a layer of dazzling golden powder as well. At the same time, Zen felt some warmth from the golden object. This warm current, I've felt it before, Zen said as he studied the golden object in Sword Chen's hand. Sword Chen nodded. Before, when your mind was suppressed by fear, I used the scorching gold to help you drive away the fear. We wouldn't need it if we were going to the upper part of the sea of meditation, but this time, we're going to set up the sword array in the depths of the sea, so we'll certainly need this thing. The scorching gold was a magical object that had come into existence in the sea of meditation. The bottom of the sea of meditation was filled with some extremely powerful unknown things that even the strongest fiends wouldn't be able to survive against. Fortunately, the unknown feared the light that the scorching gold gave off. As long as the light of the scorching gold didn't go out, it wouldn't be a problem for warriors who were under the protection of the light to roam the bottom of the sea. Follow me. Holding the scorching gold in his hand, Sword Chen stepped out of the bubble. Zen quickly stretched out his hand and stroked the long table, recalling all the swords that had been refined by Sword Chen into his space ring. Plop, plop, Zen followed Sword Chen and sank into the thick dark water again. Before, when Zen had descended, he hadn't been able to see anything. But this time, he could see each and every detail. The scorching gold in Sword Chen's hand was emitting a golden light that illuminated the area 10 feet around. Make sure that you are always under the cover of the golden light from the scorching gold. These unknown things are very sensitive and will slowly gather around you. The moment you are outside the golden light's protection, they will attack together. Sword Chen warned him. Didn't you say that these unknown things have no forms? Then how do you know they will attack? Zen asked. After a few moments of silence, Sword Chen replied, there was a time when I was chased by a fiend in the sea of meditation. After his scorching gold burned out and the golden light disappeared, the unknown things came over. Every time Sword Chen recalled this incident, his heart would flutter with fear. There was no doubt that even the fiends would be extremely afraid of the unknown things. As they were speaking, Zen suddenly felt a surge of power coming from beside him. Both of them turned their heads at the same time. It seemed that there were many huge things slowly approaching them from the distance. Chapter 2356, The Devil. The light emitted by the scorching gold was extremely intense, but it couldn't spread far in the black water. However, the force of primitive fear in the undercurrents had been dispelled by the golden light from the scorching gold, so Zen didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Plop, plop, plop. As they continued to swim downward in the black water, the turbulent undercurrents became stronger and stronger. Some of these undercurrents surged toward Zen, intending to sweep him away from Sword Chen's side. Hurry up, these creatures are watching us greedily. If the undercurrents manage to sweep you away, you will lose your life, Sword Chen warned. Zen nodded and followed closely after the demi-holy being. From afar, it looked as if the two were moving forward in a dark forest under the light of the triangular bullion. If that light was extinguished, they would immediately be devoured by the menacing beasts. Sword Chen's bubble was floating undisturbed in the middle of the Sea of Meditation. The depth of the Sea of Meditation was far beyond Zen's expectation. Although they weren't swimming slowly by any means, it took Zen an hour to finally feel the seabed under his feet. Just as he did every time he ventured a new place, he released his spiritual sense and found a huge trench in front of him. He didn't know how far it extended. Here we are, you can stick the first sword there. Sword Chen said, pointing to one side of the trench. Zen let his spiritual sense wander over to the place that Sword Chen was pointing at and soon found that a sharp sword was stabbed into the surface of the trench. Okay, he said before obediently taking out a long sword. Following Sword Chen's example, he activated the mark at the bottom of the sword and then launched the sword fiercely toward the surface of the trench. Rumble. The black water was very viscous, and the water pressure at the bottom of the sea was extremely high. Fortunately, with his strength, Zen was able to launch the sword with enough force. The long sword left a string of bubbles in its wake as it flew toward the trench. Thump. A moment later, a dull sound was heard. Zen and Sword Chen both swept the area with their spiritual senses and found that half of the long sword was stabbed firmly into the trench. Sword Chen turned to Zen and gave him a thumbs up. The long sword had already been refined by Sword Chen, so when Zen activated it and inserted it into the trench, it formed a subtle connection with Zen's mind. Zen smiled as he threw his spiritual sense upward. Before this, he hadn't released his spiritual sense into the rest of the sea because he had been afraid of the unknown creatures. But since Sword Chen did not stop him now, it meant that there was no longer any danger in releasing his spiritual sense. Zen thoroughly swept the area above him but couldn't find anything there. There was nothing but black water. This was completely different from what he intuitively sensed. He could clearly feel that many unknown creatures were following him and Sword Chen. He could even tell that these unknown creatures were of different sizes and were floating back and forth overhead. Some of the bigger creatures were still tirelessly propelling the undercurrents at him, trying to roll him out of the area covered by the golden light of the scorching gold. So why couldn't Zen detect them with his spiritual sense? It made no sense. As I told you before, we can't detect the existence of these unknown creatures because they are unknown fears. You can feel them, but you can't verify their existence, Sword Chen explained, easily guessing what Zen was wondering about. There is no way to verify their existence. Zen's eyes flashed with curiosity. He didn't know why the Sea of Meditation existed. Did it have special functions like the reincarnation land? Or was it just an extremely dangerous area that had formed without purpose? After the first long sword was inserted, the triangular scorching gold, which was originally the size of a fist, had burned down to just over the size of a thumb. As the area covered by the golden light shrank from 10 feet to just a few feet, Zen clearly sensed the unknown creatures hiding in the black water were moving closer to them. Sword Chen just indifferently took out another piece of scorching gold from his space ring and rubbed it gently. As it began to glow, he threw another piece of scorching gold to Zen and said, "Take this and use it in case of need." Zen nodded his head. After putting away the scorching gold, he walked along the trench to the left. But he had barely taken 2 steps when he felt a powerful spiral current from the black water ahead. Splash! The stream of current spiraled toward him at an extremely fast speed. By the time Zen came to his senses, the spiral current had wrapped his body, spinning him and sending him backward. Oh no! A tense expression appeared on Sword Chen's face. If the spiral current managed to push Zen out of the area covered by the light of the scorching gold, he would die without a doubt. Sword Chen immediately wiggled forward, getting himself trapped in the spiral current as well. In this way, he was moving back in the water at the same speed as Zen, and Zen was always under the light of the scorching gold. Splash! After pushing Zen and Sword Chen back for more than 10 miles, the power of the spiral current began to weaken and the two wrestled free from it. That current is so powerful. What is it? Zen asked curiously. He felt like almost all of his strength had been drained by that current. The viscosity of the black water made it difficult to release any sort of power, so Zen had only managed to exert a tiny portion of his power. Even though he had tried his best to fight against the spiral current, he hadn't been able to escape from it. That current is also an unknown thing, Sword Chen said, looking off into the darkness with a solemn expression on his face. But it is a very powerful one. The fiends call it the devil. We are in trouble. The devil. Zen pondered over the name for a moment and then said, since it is also an unknown thing, it should also be afraid of the scorching gold, right? Of course, said Sword Chen. But it's so powerful that once it targets its prey, it will be difficult for the latter to escape from it even with the protection of the scorching gold. After finishing his sentence, he suddenly pulled Zen by his shoulder. Phew, thanks to him, Zen had just barely dodged an extremely thin spiral current. Otherwise, the current, which was not much thicker than the tip of a needle, might have pierced through Zen's head. See why I said it's powerful? A bitter smile appeared on Sword Chen's face. Chapter 2357, Losing Protection. Zen frowned. He got the feeling that the water current in the distance was constantly converging into tiny spirals. These spirals were like thin, long needles that gathered together and shot towards Zen and Sword Chen. Let's go, they called out in unison, then turned around and waded through the dark water. Water-resisting technique. The internal momentum inside Zen's body bloomed. This skill enabled people to resist water and belong to the parting water godly way. A smooth membrane of water formed on the surface of his body. Zen found it difficult to employ this skill in the dark water, but it still had the power to speed him up. Sword Chen flew at a high speed, but the spirals formed by the water were faster. Hundreds of tiny spirals of water currents followed them, forming a large net and enveloping both of them. At this moment, Zen heard a baby's cry in the dark water. This cry, that's the sound of the devil's laughter. It sounds like the cry of a 3-year-old child, Sword Chen said, looking serious. The sea of meditation was vast. Meeting the devil was a rare event. Sword Chen had hidden in the dark water for many years, and had only encountered the devils twice. When he had first met the devil, he had escaped by sheer luck. When he had encountered the devil the second time, the fiends had led the devil away. This was the first time that Zen had stepped into the sea of meditation, and he had already encountered a devil. It looked like his bad luck had reigned. In the blink of an eye, the spirals had approached Zen and Sword Chen. Both of them drew their swords in unison. Splash, splash. It was a characteristic of the dark water that any power unleashed in it would be greatly weakened. Zen launched a sword attack and moments later, the dark water had suppressed the sword radiance, causing it to become weak and considerably slow down. Zen frowned as he looked at the slowly spreading sword radiance. In contrast, the sword radiance that Sword Chen had created was much stronger than Zen's. As he brandished the sword, it emitted an exquisite sword radiance. Almost half the power that he controlled was from the force of primitive fear in the dark water. When the sword radiance met the spiral water currents, they annihilated each other and produced a swarm of bubbles. When the spiral water currents approached Zen, it took him 3 sword strikes to demolish 8 of the spirals. Sword Chen, on the other hand, launched 12 attacks. 12 thin lines spread out of his sword and brought down close to 40 spiral currents. Sword Chen and Zen worked together to break the cage that the spiral water had formed and escaped from one end. Keep moving. Sword Chen and Zen ran on the water bed, while the baby's cry continued to sound above their heads. The voice became hoarser and more annoying by the minute. It is ridiculous, isn't it? It is unable to prove the existence of such a creature, but it can use such a powerful skill. Zen said, as they flew through the water. I have thought about this before, Sword Chen said, shaking his head. These unknown creatures were, in essence, very different from other vicious creatures. Although the fiends and other fierce beasts were not real creatures, they had also been formed by the faith energy that could be seen and touched in the Abyss Demon region. While there was no way to prove the existence of these unknown things, they were able to kill people and go on a rampage. Nothing made sense anymore. The fact that they can attack has proved their existence, Zen said as he looked up through the dark water. It's just that we can't find them. Numerous spirals of water appeared again and enveloped both of them from above. On your left, a devil had attacked them. Zen and Sword Chen retaliated back together. Although they couldn't kill the devil, all they had to do was to cut off the spiral currents. Zen and Sword Chen waved their swords simultaneously to the left, cutting off dozens of spiral water flows coming at them. You mean that we just couldn't find them? Sword Chen asked, confused. Sword Chen had lived in the sea of meditation for many years to hide as well as to improve his cultivation. Over these years, he had realized that the sea of meditation was a complex concept in itself. After all, the fiends also attached great importance to this place. And when he had encountered the devil last time, he had found that the fiends paid quite a bit of attention to the devil. They had even led the devil away from Sword Chen, even though it had cost them a fellow fiend's life. The fiends were selfish and would never spare Sword Chen's life. They were willing to seize any opportunity to kill Sword Chen. There probably was something wrong with the attitude of the fiends at the time. Yes, Zen said thoughtfully. We just can't find a way to find them. 3,000 feet to your left. Stab the second sword there, Sword Chen said suddenly. Having been chased by the devil all this way, it turned out that they had arrived at the second position in the sword array that Sword Chen had arranged. They were still in danger and they knew they wouldn't die fighting just one devil. With a gentle sweep of his spiritual sense, Zen found the place where Sword Chen had previously inserted the sword. He threw out his long sword and it pierced the stone there. Let's stop here today. Let's go back to the bubble first, said Sword Chen. Other unknown things would only cause a little bit of an interference to them at most. But if they weren't careful enough, the devil would probably chase and kill them, which was why it would be better for them to avoid it for the time being. Okay, Zen said, nodding, and they both moved upwards. But the moment they changed direction, more howls rang out from above them. This time, there were more and more strange screams, indicating the presence of multiple devils above them. Both of them paled. What should we? Zen wanted to ask. But before he could do so, a number of spiral currents appeared in the dark water, flying downwards like raindrops. It was strange to see rain in the water, but Zen and Sword Chen weren't interested in the wonder that it provided. Swish, swish, swish. The spiral water currents cut a path between Zen and Sword Chen, parting them from each other. One of the spiral water currents hit Zen's arm. He felt a sharp pain, and he bent down to see a tiny hole on his arm. The water current had even penetrated into Zen's bones. Under such great pressure, Zen had no choice but to keep retreating. As he retreated this time, he stepped out from under the golden light of the scorching gold. And now that Zen had lost the protection of the golden light, all the unknown things that had been lurking around him, surged towards him. Chapter 2358, Where to Go? The force of primitive fear hidden in the undercurrents immediately engulfed Zen. Even if Zen was unable to detect the unknown creatures with his spiritual sense, he could still feel them rapidly closing in on him. Sword Chen had told him that even the most powerful fiends weren't a match for these unknown creatures, and that even a holy being would die when faced against them. So there was no way that Zen would be able to fight against them, especially with his current strength. As the unknown creatures moved around, a strong force of primitive fear passed along the undercurrents. The whole time, Zen's heart kept beating wildly. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. It was difficult for him to move even an inch. Moreover, Sword Chen was getting farther and farther away from him until the golden light in his hand completely disappeared, leaving Zen wrapped in endless darkness and fear. Just then, when he had almost lost all hope, he remembered something. The scorching gold. Earlier, Sword Chen had handed a piece of scorching gold to Zen just in case. Now was the time to use it. Zen immediately conjured up the triangular golden object in his hand. Although his body was as stiff as a statue, he gritted his teeth and forced a strand of internal momentum out of his body and guided it into the scorching gold. Fizz! The moment the scorching gold was activated, it had a wonderful reaction with the power of his internal momentum. A warm current instantly swept through his body, expelling the terrible force of primitive fear. Splash! Scared of the golden light, the unknown creatures that had gathered around him rapidly retreated in all directions. If Zen's intuition was correct, the nearest unknown creature to him had been less than a foot away just now. How dangerous, he thought to himself as he breathed a sigh of relief, tightening his grip on the scorching gold. However, the golden light emitted by the scorching gold could only stop the unknown creatures from approaching, not drive them away altogether. The devils hiding in the dark water were still lingering around as close as they could. Wah! With a strange sound that resembled a baby's cry, powerful spiral currents poured down from above him. Swish, swish, swish. Zen jerked his head forward, and a great counterforce pushed him backward. At the same time, he unleashed the water-resisting technique, and his speed suddenly increased, making him look like a dashing swordfish in the water. Swish! He successfully retreated before the spiral currents could sweep him away. However, this was only a momentary relief. The water was pitch black, and Zen couldn't find a way out at all. What should I do now? In a moment of desperation, Zen transmitted his voice through chaotic energy. There was not much distance between Zen and Sword Chen, so Sword Chen could still hear his voice. Move upward, I'll distract the devils. This was the only instruction that Sword Chen gave to Zen. At this moment, all he could do was to ask Zen to leave the depths of the dark water first. He would try to find him later after he escaped from the dangers. This was the only option for them. They both had to save themselves for now. Even Nicholas, who had been well prepared, had still been troubled by the soul-devouring bugs and the little fiends. After all, this was the Abyss Demon region. And Zen and Sword Chen were in the Sea of Meditation, no less. Upward, Zen thought to himself. There were still many narrow spiral currents shooting down from above him. Zen knew that a devil was above him. And judging by the direction of the spiral currents, he could even guess the exact location of the devil. But what was the use of that? The devil was a named unknown creature, but it was actually a power of fear. Zen might be able to fight against other creatures, but he couldn't fight against fear itself. I have to go all out. In the blink of an eye, Zen made up his mind. The spiral currents were indeed powerful. If they pierced through his body, it was likely that they could even destroy his soul. Luckily, he still had a trump card up his sleeve. It was the latent Thurgy, the wind cloud escape. He believed that this would be enough to save his life even if he was in the jaws of death. This was one of the reasons that he dared to go all out. Swish, with a twist of his body, Zen rushed upward vertically. Swish, 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 numerous narrow currents quickly formed and shot down toward him. God's intimidating strike. As Zen moved upward, he swung the shadow-bearing sword above his head, and streaks of sword radiance spurted out of the sword. After repelling a few spiral currents, Zen managed to elude the first wave of attacks from the devil. For the first time in a while, he was overjoyed. It seemed that he still had a chance to escape. As he swam rapidly, he predicted that the second wave of attacks would come from the parallel direction, or even from below. But contrary to his expectations, many spiral currents gathered above his head once again. It seemed that the devil could move at a much faster speed than Zen had imagined. No matter how fast he was, the creature always remained above him. The second wave of attacks is coming. Zen abruptly twisted his body and launched several more strikes. This time, however, he was not that lucky. The spiral currents that shot down were very narrow and dense, perfectly avoiding the sword radiance that Zen had unleashed. Puff, puff, puff. Dozens of spiral currents instantly hit Zen's shoulders, arms, and legs. Crack, crack, crack. Each spiral current directly penetrated his body, breaking all the bones in his limbs. The currents seemed to be aiming for my limbs on purpose. Zen noted leisurely. He was not that worried as he still had the latent Thurgy up his sleeve. The devil doesn't seem to have any intention of killing me. Just as Zen arrived at this conclusion, he heard the sound of water flowing and splashing above his head. This time, a huge current was sweeping down toward him. Unlike before, Zen couldn't just twist his body and escape from the approaching danger, all his limbs were broken. And even though Zen's physical recovery ability was amazing, it would still take some time for him to recover. Splash! A few moments later, he found himself caught up in the huge current. The current didn't hurt him at all, but it continued to roll down, carrying him deeper into the water. Where is it taking me? Zen wondered. Gripping the scorching gold tightly in his hand, he quickly released his spiritual sense. With his spiritual sense, he learned that he was 4,000 feet from the bottom of the Sea of Meditation. He was now diving at a very fast speed. It couldn't be planning on letting me crash and die, right? Zen was confused. However, now that he had calmed down, he really wanted to see what the unknown creatures wanted to do to him. At the speed the current was taking him, the distance of 4,000 feet passed in almost the blink of an eye. Just as Zen hit the seabed, he felt something soft on his shoulders. The seabed suddenly collapsed, and a large hole with a diameter of more than 1,000 feet appeared. Chapter 2359, A Phantom. Without the slightest pause, Zen was pulled into the large hole by the strong current. After descending about 10,000 feet, he reached the bottom of the cave, which branched out in a horizontal direction. Then, along with the traction of the current, he began to advance horizontally. Splash! The sound of black water surging into the cave could be heard clearly from behind, signaling that this cave had originally been a hollow and empty space without water. Now that Zen had inadvertently opened the door to the cave by letting himself be swept up by the devil, the cave was filling up with water. But why had the devil forced Zen into this cave in the first place? This cave. It was hard for Zen to imagine that there would be a separate cave under the Sea of Meditation. The Sea of Meditation was located in the Abyss Demon region, just like the Reincarnation Land. Where could this cave possibly lead to? Anyway, Zen thought that he would probably learn the answer in a short time. However, the size of the cave turned out to be far greater than he had imagined. 2 hours later, he was still floating along the narrow cave with the devil and the unknown creatures following closely behind. Every time the spiral current that enveloped Zen became weak, the devil would release another current to continue to propel Zen forward. Although the size of the scorching gold that Sword Chen gave Zen was relatively large, it had been burning for quite a long time now. Now, it was barely the size of a small stone, and the light it was emitting had become faint. The unknown creatures behind him would probably swarm forward as soon as the light of the scorching gold went out. With these creatures, it seems that I won't be able to reach the destination, Zen thought with a helpless smile. So far in his adventures, Zen had almost never given up hope on survival. But this time, he really couldn't think of a way out. As soon as the golden light emanated by the scorching gold disappeared completely, the unknown creatures pounced on Zen. But just as he was about to be swallowed by them, he heard a sharp cry from the devil. The next moment, all of the unknown creatures quieted down and quickly retreated. It seemed that the unknown creatures were nothing but the devil's soldiers that followed its orders. So the devil really is taking me somewhere, Zen thought, his guess solidifying. If the devil really wanted to take Zen somewhere, it made sense that it would not allow the unknown creatures to swallow him. However, Zen was quite surprised that the devil could order the unknown creatures directly. This meant at least a few things. The devil was a top unknown creature in the sea of meditation, and it was definitely intelligent. Of course, it was also possible that it was simply being manipulated by an intelligent creature that was more powerful than itself. Anyway, now that Zen knew that the unknown creatures wouldn't devour him, he relaxed and lay flat in the current, allowing it to transport him to somewhere unknown. A few hours passed. He heard a few roars that became louder and louder. Zen released his spiritual sense again to find out what was in front of him. As the water becoming shallow ahead, he was slightly stunned. While he was pondering over this, he felt his body become light. Then, all of a sudden, he was propelled out of the black water by the spiral current. He flew a clear arc in the air before landing on dry ground. There was still darkness all around him. Now, he seemed to be in another long and narrow cave, but one without water. Since there is no light here, I'll have to use my spiritual sense to explore the cave. But just before releasing his spiritual sense, Zen patted himself on the head. Then, he reached his hand out into the air and squeezed lightly. A blazing flame appeared on his palm, immediately lighting up the surrounding space. Phew, Zen was glad to be back on land. Splash, splash. With the light from the flame, Zen saw the waves of black water constantly rising and falling behind him. There seemed to be creatures wriggling under the water. No doubt the unknown creatures and the devil. The devil had brought him to this place and then urged him to enter the depths of this cave. A wry smile appeared on Zen's face. He looked around but found nothing special. Then, he raised the flame in his hand and walked deeper into the cave. Without the shackles of the black water, he felt much more relaxed. Being in the black water was nothing like being in a normal sea. The pressure in the sea of meditation was just too strong. Zen could only exert 20% of his strength in the black water. Even Samuel had given up on chasing Zen after noticing the special quality of the black water. The cave was very deep. After walking slowly for a while, Zen spread out his thunder wings and flew forward at a rapid speed. Before long, a bronze gate appeared in front of him. The carving of the gate was very exquisite, but what made it stand out was its surface, which reflected different light rays, forming peculiar patterns. Is this the base of the fiends? Zen wondered inwardly with his eyebrows raised. According to what Sword Chen had said, the fiends used the sea of meditation as their cultivation place, so it was reasonable to guess that this was their base. However, according to Sword Chen again, the fiends were not absolutely safe in the sea of meditation. The only reason they cultivated there was to gain some special power. If that was true, then the sea of meditation didn't belong to the fiends at all. And that must mean that there were more powerful monsters than the fiends. Zen was shocked by his inference. The fiends were already extraordinarily powerful. What could be stronger than them? While Zen was deep in thought, the bronze gate in front of him suddenly made a big noise and shifted a little, leaving a small crack. Looking at the thin crack, Zen took 2 steps back. The unknown creatures in the black water had already been terrifying enough. Who knew what was waiting for him behind this gate? As the crack got wider and wider, a figure appeared. Why not come in since you are already here? The phantom asked. That's my voice, Zen thought. He raised his eyebrows in surprise and looked straight ahead. With the light from the flame, he was able to see the phantom's face clearly. It looked just like him. What a cheap illusion. Don't play such low tricks, Zen said coldly, staring at the phantom. It was not difficult for even a true god to create an illusion incarnation. For example, Zen could create an incarnation with water by using the parting water godly way, and it was very strong, far more powerful than the phantom in front of him. Do you really think it's just an illusion? The phantom in front of the door smiled faintly and stretched out a hand toward Zen before slightly flicking 4 of his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. The swords condensed by the forces from the 4 fingers shot toward Zen from different directions. Chapter 2360, So Real. Zen could feel the auras of the 4 invisible swords even with his eyes closed. They were definitely the 4 swords from the god's killing sword array. The Buddha Emperor's sword fiercely attacked Zen head-on. The other 3 swords circled in from the side, trying to surround Zen. As someone who was very familiar with the god's killing sword array, there was no way Zen would allow himself to be trapped in it. In the face of the Buddha Emperor's sword's attack, Zen didn't retreat, but instead moved forward. When he was just a foot away from the Buddha Emperor's sword, he wiggled his body like a fish and brushed past the sword. In this way, he easily left the 4 long swords behind. Whoosh! He tapped his foot lightly on the ground, and then dashed toward the phantom in front of the gate. It was not surprising for an ordinary phantom to have the same face as his. What was surprising, however, was that the phantom in front of him could use the god's killing sword array. This made Zen curious about what the phantom was. Unexpectedly, the phantom standing in front of the gate just smiled at him and then took a few steps in the other direction. As it moved, its voice reached Zen's ears. Follow me, you have no other choice. Zen's face darkened when he heard these words. Although he would be walking right into a trap, he had come too far to turn back now. Besides, the only way out that he knew of was to go back through the black water, but the devil and the unknown creatures were waiting for him there. He didn't know how to deal with them. When he opened the door in front of him, a gust of cold air rushed past him. In front of his eyes was a huge ice palace. The whole palace had been built with huge ice blocks. The rich cold air turned into a milk-white mist as it rushed past Zen, who was outside the bronze gate. Before long, Zen's face was covered with a layer of frost. Enveloped by the cold air, he felt like the blood in his body was about to freeze. The air is too cold. Zen stomped his foot lightly, and a wave of internal momentum spread out along the sole of his foot and turned into a flame. Phew! As the flame roared wildly, it forced all the cold air in and around Zen's body away. Then, Zen looked up again and saw the phantom. It was standing not far away with a provocative look on its face. Then, it floated ahead, going deeper into the strong chill air. As soon as the phantom moved, Zen spread out the thunder wings on his back. Crack! Although he had no idea what was going on, he wanted to capture the phantom first. By flying, he was able to easily narrow the distance of a few hundred feet between him and the phantom. The moment he spotted the phantom in the milky white air, he stretched out his hand to grab it. Do you still think I'm a phantom? The phantom asked as it suddenly turned around and punched Zen in the palm. Puff! Even before the phantom's fist hit him, he felt the force that it carried. The power! Zen's eyes widened. The phantom's power was actually comparable to his own. This was no ordinary phantom then. Since he was thrown off guard, he couldn't adjust his body in time and found himself flying backward. After flying more than 100 feet back in the air, he exerted his power and pressed himself back on the ground. Sizz! His feet left 2 long and thin marks on the crystal-clear ice surface as he slid to a stop. As for the phantom, it was still walking ahead with a faint smile on its face. After the confrontation just now, Zen was a lot more cautious. Few consummate true gods had been able to compete with him in terms of strength. And after he had absorbed the wild god power, even demi-holy beings were far inferior to him. Moreover, phantoms were much weaker than real beings. Even phantoms created by the parting water godly way had only 40 to 50% of the strength of the real beings. As for phantoms created by the grand purple aura technique, there was a large number of them, but they didn't even have 1,000th of the strength of the real beings. Am I in an illusion now? Zen asked. No. 9527. No, number 9527 answered. Ever since he had accidentally fallen into an illusion in the reincarnation land, Zen had become vigilant. The phantom in front of him didn't make sense at all, so the most logical conclusion was that he was in an illusion. However, if this place was an illusion, number 9527 would know. But there's something very strange about the phantom, added number 9527. What is it? Zen asked. It doesn't seem to be a phantom at all. It's just you, number 9527 said in bewilderment. Hearing this, Zen became more suspicious. After hesitating for a few moments, Zen had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow the phantom. The ice palace was very large and went on, just like the cave. After passing through several layers of cold air and many gates for about an hour, the phantom leading the way finally stopped. It turned around and said to Zen, "You can wait here." "Why should I listen to you?" Zen raised his eyebrows. The phantom smiled and gently flipped its hand. The space ring on its finger flashed and a long sword appeared in its hand. The shadow-bearing sword. An incredible expression appeared in Zen's eyes. The phantom's shadow-bearing sword was the same as Zen's. What was more, the phantom's habits, mannerisms, and behavior were also exactly the same as Zen's. "Because I'm you, you have to listen to yourself," the phantom said softly. A demonic trick. Perhaps everyone would react so disbelievingly if they came face to face with a being who looked exactly like them. However, Zen was beginning to agree with what number 9527 had said. It was likely that this phantom was him. But how could there be an exact copy of him in the divine land? Its martial arts, cultivation system, and everything else were the same as his. But even so, how could it have a shadow-bearing sword? The one of a kind sword had personally been given to Zen by Harper, so how could there be another one? Swish! With a flash of light, Zen's own shadow-bearing sword appeared in his hand, and a ray of sword radiance shot towards the phantom. Ha ha! The phantom chuckled and swung its shadow-bearing sword at the same time. Clang! The two swords collided with each other with a crisp sound. Even the internal momentum is the same. Zen raised his eyebrows. He cultivated plenty of godly ways, so the way's blending energy contained in his god's intimidating strike was very complicated. But the energy that the phantom strike had released was the same. It was obvious that the phantom even had the same godly tile that Zen had. "As I said, I am you, and you are me. How can you defeat me?" The phantom laughed again.